When I was about 5 or 6 years old, I recall vague memories of playing the original Final Fantasy VII. It was my mother's favourite game of all time, and still is. Not like she's an avid gamer or anything like that, but still. The only memories I have of playing the game was fighting as Cloud and Barret, with having no idea on how to actually play, and remembering a few enemies like the sweepers, cutters, and the scorpion at the end of the bombing mission. I'm pretty certain that I never got past the bombing mission. Regardless, that was my only experience with FF7 in my 19 years of playing, until I saw a few trailers for the upcoming remake. The trailers looked good to me, but I still wasn't completely sold on buying it, until I played the demo, which completely sold me on the game. Playing as Cloud and Barret brought back those vague memories of playing as them 13 or 14 years before that. It wasn't until Christmas of 2020 that I got the game. I didn't buy it straight away when it came out. Regardless, I played through it a bunch through the Christmas period and New Year, and yeah, I fell in love with it. Over the years, I've been less interested in buying new games. I think most people can agree the gaming industry has gone to shit, but FF7 Remake really captured me like few games do these days. I don't think the entire game is objectively a masterpiece or anything like that. It definitely does have a few problems, mainly with pacing and level design. But for me, the world, the story, and especially the characters are wonderful. And of course the gameplay as well. Don't worry, I'm aware the main focus of the game should pretty much always be gameplay. Games have become more interactive movies these days. But the gameplay of Remake and Rebirth are brilliant, and I don't want people to overlook that. So the next decision for me after completing the remake was to wait 4 years for the second part, or just buy the OG for like £3 and complete the game I started 13 years ago. Yeah, I wasn't gonna wait, sorry. I needed to see where the story went and see how the Midgard section was done in the OG and compare it to Remake. I'm not gonna go much into it, but yeah, I can see why it's one of the best games of all time. I loved it. Sorry for yapping a bunch, but I just want to give context to my history and stance on the series before Rebirth. Obviously, I was looking forward to Rebirth. My expectations were extremely high, and for me, they were absolutely met. I said before that I think Remake had flaws despite me loving it, but with Rebirth, a lot of the problems with Remake were fixed in Rebirth, while also regaining and expanding the things I loved about Remake, like the world and characters and gameplay. The game consumed my life for a couple months, and now it's been a whole year since it was released. So I'd like to go through the game and share what I feel about it a year later. Was it as good as I first thought? Where do I stand at this point on the changes to the story, mainly the final 2 or 3 hours? And how do I think they handled the iconic scenes from the original? And what do I hope they will do for the third and final part? Well, let's go through it. Okay, so before I begin, this video is going to be quite detailed. However, I'm not going to analyze every single little detail of every single scene in the game, or philosophically analyze every single thing a character does in the game and say the meaning behind it. I mean, I'm sure there's videos out there that do that and are like 5 hours long or something like that. This video is going to be long enough, so yeah, I'll just talk about things that I feel are relevant to talk about. So yeah, let's go. Okay, so straight away, I'm just going to say that I do not like multiverses or timeline shit. It's always very messy and it's pretty much always used as an excuse to bring back dead characters or just create fanfiction, which admittedly, I get why people call this remake story fanfiction. They aren't exactly wrong. Anyway, the game starts out in this alternate world where Zack is still alive and him and Cloud have returned to Midgard. I'm not gonna lie, I don't really know what to say about these segments with Zack or the whole multiple worlds thing. I mean, it's somewhat explained by Sephiroth near the end of the game, but I don't know, I'll go more into it later. I think we'll have to wait until the trilogy concludes until it's made more clear. Regardless, it was a nice surprise to play as Zack at the start of the game. Zack and technically Red 13 save Aerith, a comatose Aerith, from a Shinra helicopter. Zack doesn't even attempt to save Red 13. I mean, to be fair, he can't really do anything about that. It's not like he has 4 arms. And Zack cries over the girl that he abandoned 5 years ago. Yes, I'm joking, chill out. And the prologue ends. Also, I have to mention that when I took control of Zack, I realised I would not be playing in performance mode, as I thought I was playing underwater with how blurry it was. I'll always go for 60 FPS over more detailed graphics in games, but nah, the blur was extremely off-putting. To be honest, I'm not really bothered about 30 FPS. after like 10 or 15 minutes, my eyes adjust to it. So the first actual chapter in the game is the iconic flashback, and in Rebirth, it's clearly the most faithful part of the game, so I'm not going to go too much detail into it compared to other chapters. However, the very start of the flashback pretty much heavily implies that Cloud is this random trooper, whereas in the OG, the revelation of this isn't revealed until near the very end of the game. Yeah, I mean, it's not like it explicitly says that this trooper is Cloud, but I wonder how many people who didn't play the original eventually figured this out. Regardless, the game nails how Cloud, Zack, acts in this flashback through voice and mannerisms. One small change about the opening scene in the flashback that I didn't like is the big dragon that stops the truck in the original is replaced by these two obese discount dragons, if you want to even call them dragons. I mean, the scene is shot very nicely and it does let you play as Sephiroth, but Sephiroth destroying a giant dragon is way more impactful than taking out a couple of these. I mean, that dragon is an enemy in Rebirth. They could have easily put it in. Anyway, this is a minor nitpick, it's not that deep. Moving on. Exploring Nibelheim is very faithful, from seeing Cloud's mother to going through Tifa's things. I think going up Mount Nibel is okay. It's basically a gameplay tutorial. I'll go more into combat soon. I'll just wait until we get access to 3 characters, as that's where the combat shines. I wish Mount Nibel was as gloomy as it was in the original. It's quite bright in Rebirth, which makes it lose some of that atmosphere it did in the original. Playing as Sephiroth is cool. I don't think he's that fun to play as though. Honestly, it's not like it really matters though, as it's only playable for half of the chapter. Not even that, honestly. However, in those tedious later Chadley VR missions, it actually does show me how OP he is in this game, as the other late VR challenges in the game were an absolute grueling pain in the arse. I actually did the one as Sephiroth on the first attempt. The Materia Guardian, who was first seen in the return to Nibelheim in the OG, is now here in the flashback to serve as a decent tutorial boss. It introduces synergy abilities, which I believe to be the best and most fun addition to the combat. Oh, and the more simple synergy skills. It's funny that I forgot to mention the synergy skills, as I forgot to use them on my first playthrough for half of the game. Not that they are bad or anything like that, far from it, I just simply forgot about them for some reason. Anyway, as I said, I'll get into more gameplay later. Also, this trooper that is definitely not Cloud, being shown to protect Tifa multiple times, is a nice subtle addition. Sephiroth's descent into madness was more impactful in Rebirth, I feel, mainly because it tries so hard to present Sephiroth as a genuinely good person. Yeah, I mean, he acts nice, but I wouldn't go as far to call him as a good person. Anyway, this is something they also tried really hard to portray in Crisis Core. In Rebirth, his descent into madness really comes across as if he's being possessed. It's a slow, complete personality shift. You can see in a few shots that Jenova takes his place, to perhaps indicate that she's somewhat in control of him at this point, or at least has some sway over him. Everywhere I've seen, it says that Sephiroth is the one in control over Jenova, but I guess maybe before Sephiroth died, maybe she did have a bit more control or sway over him. I don't know, I always see and hear conflicting things on this topic. Feel free to educate me in the comments. Anyway, I mostly like how they did the destruction of Nibelheim. I'm surprised they added the amount of violence towards the villagers that they did. It's not like Sephiroth is slicing everyone in half, but they definitely had to show him kill at least a few villagers. I don't know, I just didn't expect them to show any violence to the villagers for some reason. Probably because I doubt they'd want it to be 18 rated or M rated, whatever Americans call it. The only thing I don't like about this scene is the villagers just refuse to shoot Sephiroth here, just stand around him for like 20 minutes. If you ask me, they deserve to die. They could have prevented the events from FF7 if they just pulled the trigger. Not Cloud being at the front of Cloud's mother's house saying mum or mom in Cloud's voice is another big hint of who this trooper is. I really do think that the people who didn't play the original must have pieced it together eventually. Maybe not at this point, but most likely later, like chapter 11 or something. Finally, back in the present day, I'm glad Tifa let someone know that Cloud is talking shit in his story, and not just keep silent about it the entire time. I was wondering how they would deal with this in Rebirth, and so far, I think it's smart how they were going about it. Tifa knows that Cloud is retarded, and maybe calling him out on the story might mess his mind up some more. This is shown more in later chapters, especially in chapter 11. And of course, Sephiroth being a weirdo tries to manipulate Cloud into thinking Tifa died 5 years ago at the reactor, and that Tifa is actually Genova taking Tifa's form. I really like this addition, as we know that Sephiroth knows the events of the OG FF7, and perhaps he knows that Tifa is pivotal in fixing Cloud's mind. Trying to get Cloud to turn on Tifa is a good move from him, eventually manipulating him enough to even try and kill her in chapter 9. And when that fails, he even tries to kill her himself. It definitely seems that he somewhat perceives her as a threat. Unless, since this is a reimagining, Sephiroth isn't actually lying about Tifa not being real, and she actually is a shape-shifting alien eldritch being. So the Nibelheim flashback is very faithful to the original, but does expand on it a bit, such as more hints on the identity of this Shinra trooper, who's definitely not Cloud, and presenting Sephiroth's descent into madness a bit more believable. I mean, it did seem very sudden in the original, and I guess it does seem somewhat sudden here, but yeah, great chapter. Don't worry, I'm going to go into more detail on the remaining chapters on the game. It's just that this one is very similar to the original and there's not that much to say on it, so yeah. So chapter 2 doesn't really consist of anything significant story-wise. It's basically just a chapter to introduce you to the world and side activities you'll be doing for 200 plus hours. So this is a good opportunity to make this section dedicated to that, and also talk about the improved gameplay from the first game. To start, when I played the original right after remake, once I completed the Midgard section of the game, after spending the game in multiple slums for 6 to 7 hours, it was nice to see an actual traditional style town when entering Calm, and each and every town you visit throughout the game after that were all unique and just generally pleasant to be in, all accompanied by iconic music. Yeah, this is the first time I've mentioned music in this video, and I'm probably not going to talk about it much more. I mean, there's not much to say about it. Everyone knows how great the music is in Final Fantasy, including Rebirth. Anyway, it might seem a bit random, but seeing these towns in Rebirth was one of the most anticipated things for me about this game. And I have to say, I think Square nailed all of them and surpassed my expectations on them. The first one, of course, being Calm. Seeing it lit at night briefly in the previous chapter was pretty. Kind of wish the game had a day and night cycle, or at least just an option to change the time of day. Not a big deal though. And once you step out and start exploring the town, it cleansed my eyes of seeing the ugly, poorly lighted slums of Remake. There's not actually a lot of things you can do in these towns, apart from accepting a few side quests and finding opponents for Queen's Blood. We will get into Queen's Blood later, but just walking through Calm and the rest of the towns and admiring it all, listening to the shitload of NPC dialogue, which can actually add a lot of world building, and listening to the redone classic music was always one of the standouts of this game. I think atmosphere is a very important and underlooked aspect of games, and Rebirth definitely has a strong atmosphere throughout. Anyway, enough about towns. Well, kind of. Throughout various towns in the game, there will be an opportunity to speak to the rest of the party, giving you 3 dialogue options, each option varying in 3 stars. The dialogue option with 3 stars, of course, giving you the most affinity points to that certain character, and 1, of course, being the lowest. These affinity points, of course, accumulate in both trips to the Gold Saucer and determine who your date is with there. It's not just through these conversations you gain affinity points though. You also get it through combat, through synergy moves, and also certain story moments and choices. Yeah, I mean, I think these are all well thought out ways of determining your Gold Saucer dates, especially the subtle synergy abilities mechanic. The conversations don't show the stars on your first playthrough, but you can usually tell what dialogue option is high affinity and low, depending on how the character responds to you. So you can always just make a save before you pick an option, in case you aren't happy with your choice, and try to save your future date. Personally, I didn't reload at all. I felt it would defeat the purpose of it. I had a preference on who my date would be, but I didn't massively care. I'm not a massive shipper fanatic like 90% of the fans. Finally, I like how all the dialogue options are mixed around on the dialogue wheel, so you can't deduce the amount of affinity points you will get for each option just by judging where it is on the dialogue wheel. For example, in Mass Effect, there's a clear pattern on what's a Paragon option and what's a Renegade option, top right and left being Paragon and bottom right and left being Renegade. Oh, and I forgot, side quests are also always tied to specific characters, and completing them will also get you affinity points for that character. Well, I may as well stay on side quests now. So side quests in Remake, I think it's fair to say that they were not very good, very bare bones. So how about Rebirth? Well, they are absolutely better than its previous entry. The main reason for this is because most, if not all of them, have a lot of good character moments and conclusions. For example, a popular one is a simple escort mission for a dog with Barrett. An amusing catchy remix of Stamp's theme plays on the mission while Barrett talks about Marlene and how he never wants to leave her or let her go, while also being extremely dramatic about it.
You silly daddy. He's gonna fail you. Oh, I can't let you go. I just can't.
It's a very simple mission, but Barrett and the unnecessarily hard track made it memorable. Also, another example with Stargazing with Aerith has a nice conclusion, and there's a few with Tifa that have good conclusions as well and moments. What I'm trying to say is the side quests themselves, gameplay wise, aren't extremely special or anything like that, but all the character work in them makes it worth it. Like the quest where you are tediously collecting chickens with a metal box isn't exactly exciting or anything like that, but the conclusion made it worth it and memorable. I mentioned it before, but the characters I think are the best thing about these remakes, and I appreciate the side quests solidifying that more. So those are actual side missions given to you by NPCs in the world, but they aren't the only side activities to do. The others come from everyone's favourite character.
Hey there. What a pleasant surprise.
Seriously, I don't know why everyone hates him so much. Yeah, I mean it interrupts you every 10 seconds, but still. So Chadley gives you a bunch of shit to do, some of them not really worth talking about, such as finding life springs and activating towers. To be fair, the life springs can give you some lore on the region you're in, so for me it's worth it. But the two main things you'll be doing for Chadley are finding the proto relics and his endless VR fights. I'll start off quickly with the VR fights. Most of them are piss easy. They will get you rewards like materia, and of course fighting and beating summons unlocks their summoning materia. The summon fights are really fun and mostly quite challenging if you pick the full strength option and not be a pussy. But my god, the last batch you get after completing the proto relic quest are absolutely tedious, unbearable pain. I completed all of them, but never again. The proto relic quest line is probably the best quest line. Or actually, I don't know if I can say that when Gears and Gambits is a part of the quest line. Holy shit. That minigame absolutely fucking stinks. I'm not ashamed to say I had the game beat it for me through that autoplay feature or whatever it's called. Fuck that shit, bro. I'm never doing that again. The proto relic quests are similar to what I said about the side missions. The things you do in them aren't exactly special from a gameplay perspective. Fort Condor coming back briefly was fun, despite it not being as fleshed out as in Remake's DLC. And the Nebel region proto relic quest was good. You got to fight a few unique enemies. But the actual scenes, such as finding out what happened to Wedge, and the wholesome scenes with the dead loser gang, the inn owner in Calm who helped you out earlier, who was revealed to be a soldier, appears here as a black robe, and Sephiroth showing up briefly are all good moments. The quest concludes with fighting 2 summons at once 3 times, which I personally didn't find that hard, maybe apart from the Phoenix and Kujata fight, before finally concluding the proto relic quest with a chaotic but enjoyable battle with Gilgamesh that took like fucking 10 minutes. Not 10 minutes of attempts, just the fight is long in itself. Overall, despite having a few downsides and blips, the proto relic side quest was the most enjoyable overall for me, I'd say. I always anticipated the next one when I got to a new region. Okay, let's finally actually get to gameplay, as it is a game. So I always really enjoyed Remake's combat. It was a smart way of having the combat action orientated, but also somewhat keeping some element of turn-based combat, with the ATB meter slowly filling up to give you access to actual meaningful abilities. It did feel quite tactical, especially in the boss fights where you can't just mindlessly button mash to win. No, you actually have to be a bit strategical about it, especially in hard mode. I really don't have any real complaints about the combat of Remake. Maybe that the difficulty of the game should have been a bit harder, as it would have made the tactical aspect of the game that I talked about shine more, requiring you to be far more attentive to each and every ability you use. Even in the hard mode you unlock once beating the game, it was not very difficult either. I don't think every game has to be overly challenging or anything. I just feel with this game's combat in particular, it would have made it stand out a bit more. And one more minor nitpick is in the original, sorting and switching materia on characters was generally somewhat enjoyable personally. In Remake, there's not enough different materia and character slots to mess around with compared to the original. However, it is only a nitpick. I mean, the Midgard section was similar in the OG with how much materia and slots you had available. So did Rebirth improve and innovate on a already great combat system? Definitely. The fundamental combat mechanics and features are the same, but the addition of synergy abilities and skills was a brilliant addition to Rebirth. Starting with synergy skills, I mentioned before that I forgot to use them about half of the game. I don't really have a reason why. I think I was just more focused on character abilities rather than synergy skills, but I wish I hadn't forgot about them as they are very useful and just generally fun. They can be used for a multitude of combat options, such as combining to unleash a very high damage attack. Tifa can get launched into the air by another party member to do damage in the air. Air combat in Remake was pretty shit, by the way. You can assume a defensive stance with two party members to massively negate damage received. Some characters can be covered by another party member, and so on. There's a lot of useful abilities, but most importantly, it's just fun to combine with these characters in combat. But that's not all for team attacks, as the synergy abilities are my favourite addition to the combat. You will fill up these pips for each character by using ATB abilities and magic for that specific character. Once the pips reach a certain amount for two characters, usually being 3 or 4 pips filled, you can unleash a big combined attack with those two characters. But these attacks are more than just flashy cool animations that do a lot of damage. Performing a synergy ability will grant you one of 4 benefits after the move is performed. The first one being increasing your limit level, so if you use that synergy ability, then you will get access to a stronger limit breaker move for the characters that use that move together. Each character has 3 limits in this game, the third one you have to unlock. The next benefit you can get by performing a synergy ability is getting unlimited MP for a certain amount of time with the characters you used to do the synergy ability. The third one is increasing the amount of time an enemy is staggered while they're staggered. This one's kinda meh, as the amount of time added on the stagger is not substantial at all. And the final and most expensive one is Refocus, which increases the two characters' standard 2 ATB bars to 3 for a limited amount of time, which will of course give you more frequent use of abilities after using it. I found myself using the limit break one the most and Refocus the least. Refocus is honestly probably the best one. I could never be asked to spend 4 pips on it for each character. So yeah, the whole synergy abilities mechanic is great. Honestly though, I don't really care much about the benefits for performing them, as I was always just looking forward to seeing these extremely cool animations. Moving on, I'll just give a brief summary of each playable character. Cloud is of course an all-rounder. He gets some really strong new abilities, and he now has ranged basic attacks, which I found myself using a lot. Plus, he can fight in the air now, properly. Not sure if I'm a fan of his new Punisher stance attack animation though. Also, if you don't always have his Buster Sword equipped, then you're playing the game wrong. Barrett is an absolute tank. If you put a bunch of defensive based material on him like I did, then that brother is never dying in your party. I think Tifa is a bit of a glass cannon. I put like no magic on her, just using her abilities, and yeah, she melts everything. Her stagger damage is ridiculous. But as I said, glass cannon, unless you put a bunch of HP up material on her. She went down a lot in the later VR arena fights, for example. Very fun though. Aerith is strong, but I feel like it took ages for her to fill up her ATB bar. Of course you can use materia to help with this, but yeah, once you set up with her, she's very strong and fun to use. Red is one of 2 new characters to be playable in Rebirth. Personally, I liked playing as him. He felt like the most strategical characters to play as, through his emphasis on blocking and playing defensive to eventually unleash stronger attacks. He also has a lot of status abilities that usually require materia, such as haste and cure. I can understand he might not be everyone's preference though. Yuffie honestly is probably the most OP character. She's clearly meant to be used as a mage, but she does have really good normal abilities such as Doppelganger and Elemental Nujitsu are basically broken when used together. But yeah, I never really cared for her attacks with a boomerang, whatever it's called. I always fought with her at range. And despite being a new playable character, I used Cait Sith the least. I don't think he's bad, but he definitely is the most confusing and probably least enjoyable character to play as. A lot of his abilities are just weird and kind of luck based, which I guess fits him as a character at least. In the OG FF7, I never used him, mainly because I didn't particularly like the character in general. The good thing that in Rebirth, as an actual character, he is improved, but gameplay wise, eh. Finally, I mentioned the nitpick in Remake was not being able to mix up materia and experiment a bunch, but in Rebirth, more slots and options are available now, and of course more playable characters. I got that therapeutic feeling of adjusting materia in Rebirth, just like the OG. So overall, Rebirth's gameplay and combat is improved, and honestly, one of my favourites in gaming. Listen, I know people including myself probably think more about the characters, music, story and world when thinking about FF7, but let's not forget that the combat in these two remakes have been brilliant, especially in Rebirth. So as I said before, nothing really happens in chapter 2 plot wise. It's basically just acquiring a chocobo to get across a swamp, ending with a solid boss fight with a Midgard summit. The only thing narratively I want to mention in chapter 2 is the very end, where Sephiroth essentially saves Cloud from the Midgard summit. It reminded me of this line from Remake.
But I will not end, nor will I have you end.
Who knows what plans Sephiroth has for Cloud, and just in general. The guy is constantly talking in riddles, and just generally talking out his arse in these remakes. You know, I don't really know what to think about Sephiroth in this trilogy so far. I like the concept of him knowing that he originally failed in the past and became a livestream time traveler or something like that. But I don't know, I think I'm just gonna have to wait till the third game whether I decide if I like the character in these remake series or not. There is one thing, however, I really hope they don't do with this character. If they try and give him a redemption arc, I'm gonna be honest, that'll be a massive stain on the remake project. I'll get more into that near the end of this video though. Chapter 3 is a short but sweet one. The premise of the chapter is simply making your way through the abandoned mithril mines to get to the other side of the mountain and reach Junon. The party is separated into two groups, with Cloud, Tifa and Aerith encountering the Turks, including the first appearance of Elena. In the original, the Turks only appeared here briefly to converse with the party, whereas here, in Rebirth, it's made into an appreciated boss fight. I don't know if it's just me, but when I played the original, I perceived Elena would be a bit older than she appears in Rebirth. I don't know, I thought she was late 20s or something like that. Regardless, I really like her in Remake. She's still quite inexperienced and incompetent, not as much as in the original though. I mean, how does she even become a Turk in the original? She's completely incompetent. And she has some of the funniest scenes in the game. Her voice actress is really good, especially that scream.
Someone looks kinda shaky.
And Red and Barrett get split off, going through the mine through a different route, featuring a unique boss for them to fight. In Remake, you briefly play as other party members without Cloud leading the party, and it happens again here, but in more substantial segments this time round, which I'm glad about, as it lets the characters other than Cloud shine, and it also makes you play as the characters you might not use much. But yeah, apart from that, this chapter has a few little nice character moments and banter, including a callback to Cloud's hand getting wanked off in Remake.
Enough for her standard course twice, right?
Her what now?
But yeah, short but sweet chapter. Chapter 4 begins once exiting the mithril mines. You enter the Junon region, and I just realised I haven't actually talked about the regions, so let's quickly do that now. There are 6 regions, and apart from obviously looking unique from each other, the main gimmick of these regions is how you traverse them. By acquiring a special chocobo for each region, you can get around the particular region you're in. For example, the Junon region is very versatile, and only a chocobo native to the region can climb up these cliffs to get around. Some of these chocobo gimmicks are fine, but some are frustrating to put it mildly. But yeah, I've pretty much discussed what the regions consist of content-wise, so let's move on to Under Junon, where the party decide to rest. Under Junon is probably one of the more forgettable towns in the original, and honestly this game as well, now that I think about it. Regardless, it's still improved and now really feels like a coastal fishing town. There's a bit of new lore that wasn't present in the original, with there being a republic before Shinra, and there was a massive floating city before Shinra sunk it and smoked everyone and replaced it with Junon. Thought I'd mention it as I quite like this little addition to the lore. Anyway, before the party get to rest, there's a panic outside. The team check out what's happening and see that Yuffie is about to get munched on by a sea monster. Yes, Yuffie's first encounter with the party is not getting the shit beaten out of her in the forest this time round. The first opportunity to recruit her in the original is just before entering under Junon, and while you can meet her in a similar time frame in Rebirth, once you save her, she fucks off instead of joining the team. Although she recognised Barrett and Tifa from the DLC in Intermission as part of the Avalanche Splinter Cell. I actually forgot that she saw them briefly in the DLC. I'm glad they did this little scene in the DLC, as it gives Yuffie a better motive for eventually joining up with them, rather than solely just wanting to rob them of their material. The party, after saving Yuffie, go back to the inn to rest, but before you go to sleep, firstly Cloud hears a strange soy sounding voice from Aerith's room. The person or rat, cat, dog Aerith was speaking to, or not, was Red. At first, I didn't know what the fuck was going on. I thought Aerith was speaking to some interdimensional being or something like that. You never know, you can't blame me for thinking that with all the crazy shit that happened in Remake. But the next time this voice came up again, I knew what was going on, and I was not happy. You have the opportunity to speak to the rest of the team after this, the most notable one being with Tifa. She tries to subtly test Cloud here about Nibelheim and their past in general. She does this quite a bit in the game to try and get to the bottom of how fucked Cloud's mind is, I guess. As I brought up earlier, Tifa in the original seemingly just listens to Cloud talk shit about the events 5 years ago and never even tries to understand what on earth is going on with him until disc 2 or 3, I don't know what disc it was anyway, when she's pretty much forced into talking about it with him. In a way, these scenes with Tifa and Cloud in Rebirth are planting the seeds for when Tifa helps fix Cloud's mind in the livestream. The next morning, everyone raids Cloud's room, including Yuffie, who does a little rehearsed anime speech. I don't know, I don't watch anime, but it seems very weebish. Anyway, Yuffie, after a lot of yapping, reveals she had received an assassination contract from the mayor of Under Junon to assassinate the new president, Rufus. Yes, this bitch gave an assassination contract to a 16-year-old. Yuffie reveals that Rhonda, the mayor, will fund her contract by turning in the group, who obviously have large bounties on them, and a familiar voice is heard outside. The group go outside to see Roche, the weirdo added to Remake. He specifically wants Aerith, but not really. He wants to have a rematch with Cloud up in Junon itself, as he has a weird obsession with him. Once that rematch happens, I'll speak more about how I feel about Roche in this game. I actually liked his addition in Remake. He only appeared briefly, but was memorable as a result of his extremely over-the-top personality, and he was quite cool as well, I guess. However, I'm not a fan of how he was used in the sequel, but we'll get to that. Anyway, Roche leaves, and Rhonda makes some dumb excuse for ratting the group out. Yeah, okay, bitch. I like most of the characters added to Remake and Rebirth, but Rhonda can fuck off. Before heading up to Junon, a few side quests open up, one being the one I mentioned earlier about the dog escort mission with Barrett. Rhonda is lucky I even decided to escort a flipping dog. Stupid bitch. And this side mission in particular actually gives you access to a town not seen in the original, which is cool, although it's basically just a settlement for stoners and hippies. Regardless, it's good to see a new original town. So Junon was one of my most anticipated segments in Rebirth. In the original, I enjoyed it very much. From being undercover, fuck this minigame though, and just the city itself, it was one of the more humorous parts of the original, and I'm pleased to say that for me, Junon in Rebirth is actually superior to the original. It starts in a familiar way, having a dolphin minigame to launch you up above. Something that differs from the original though is everyone else joins you, rather than it just being Cloud going it alone. I prefer this, as in the original, the party just randomly show up to Junon unexplained. I mean, I guess it's a bit convenient how 5 odd looking people walk through the heavily militarized part of the city without anyone batting an eye. Maybe they realised Cloud was in a soldier uniform or something. You also get a great view of the High Wind, which we will of course be seeing more in part 3. Eventually, the party decides to actually confront Rufus, rather than just getting on a random boat and following him somewhere for some reason. Speaking of Rufus, he has a few scenes throughout Junon before the party confront him, the most notable one being him visited by a man thought dead, in fact killed by his own hand. This man, called Glenn, seemingly starts to push him about starting another war with Wutai, also ending in a message from the apparent Wutai leader, Viceroy Saruf, which triggers Rufus. Yeah, when I first witnessed this scene, I had no fucking clue what was going on. Of course, this Glenn character wasn't in the OG, but I didn't know if he was some obscure character in some random mobile game or something. And it turns out he actually is a character in a recent mobile game, Ever Crisis, a game that I've never played in my life. And apparently his story hasn't even been finished in that game yet. At this point, all I knew was Rufus seemingly killed him, and that he's allied with Wutai and messing with Rufus to start another war. And he kinda looks like Cloud Sr. Let's hope that's not the case, as that would be very silly. Anyway, enough of Glenn for now. Red and Barrett go off to check for security, while Cloud, Tifa and Aerith go to find some disguises. After being told off for being a perv for a couple of minutes,
Haha, very funny.
Come on, Cloud. You really need to be this close?
Scram!
the three put on the disguises, of course being generic Shinra Trooper uniforms. After they come across the Shinra commander, the three conveniently know how to masterfully perform a Shinra whatever this is. I can suspend my disbelief for Cloud doing this, but you are pushing it with the other two. Whatever, it's a game. Cloud, as a result of his performance, gets promoted to the captain of Midgar's 7th Infantry to lead the upcoming parade at Rufus's inauguration. However, before the parade begins, Cloud has to go and gather the other troopers in the regiment around Junon. So this is the first time you're allowed to explore the long and narrow streets of Junon, and I have to say that they comprehensively nailed the look of it. Its aesthetic really does feel like a mixture of a naval fortress and a city. I especially love the interior here. I don't know about you, but this kind of does remind me of a posh underground train station. In a bunch of separate locations are the troopers you will need to pick up. Picking up each squad consists of silly humorous scenes, each ending in the troopers marching off looking like they shat themselves or something. The most memorable one, of course, being entering a bald bar or club or cult.
No scout, no service.
Yeah, this chapter is very silly, but in a good way, mostly. Once the whole unit is collected, you'll have an option to make the parade minigame piss easy or quite challenging. The minigame is fun. It's an expanded version of the fruity dance Cloud does in the Honeybee Inn and remake. It's better than the awkward minigame in the original as well, which I failed like 20 times. As I said before, the reason why Cloud and the rest of the group are going through with this trouble is to eventually confront Rufus. Earlier, through Aerith's dialogue, it insinuates that they want to straighten out where Shinra stand on them, as Seng and Roche said contradictory things about the capture of Avalanche beforehand. I'm glad in Rebirth that the party have an actual cohesive goal while in Junon, albeit not being a very good plan if you really think about it. I'm pretty sure that in the original, the point of going to Junon was because Sephiroth was sighted there, but once Cloud gets there, there's not an actual plan, and Cloud just goes undercover while the rest of the group somehow get in with disguises from somewhere, I suppose, and randomly follow Rufus on a boat he's getting on. Once the parade is over, depending on your performance, you can win a performance award. This isn't exactly important, but if you fail, Roche and his unit will win the award, so yeah, I'm trying to win that every time, fuck Roche. But the main award is a President's Commendation, which is a scripted win for you this time, as Shinra had long caught on to Cloud, Tifa and Aerith's role in the parade. Rufus calls the three up to the stage and lets it be known that he knows it's them. However, instead of taking them into custody or even executing them, he surprisingly offers them an extremely fair deal to let them go in exchange from staying away from Midgar, and more importantly, to kill Sephiroth. So this is a welcome new premise. Remake was of course my first introduction to him in FF7, and from what little he was in that game, he made an impact, especially the boss fight, which might be a controversial opinion, but for me, it was one of my favourite fights in that game. And seeing him more in the original, I thought he was a solid secondary or tertiary antagonist. In Rebirth, he's a bit more present in the story. Shinra in general are a bit more present in the story than OG, and I think it's a bit less one-dimensional in Rebirth as well. There's a bit of mystery to him in relation to his actual goals and his past with Glenn. He's still a villain, but events at the end of the game could perhaps set him on a better path. Not saying I want him to be a straight up good guy or anything like that in part 3, but they set up a lot of potential with him for the next game. But more on that later. So yeah, I really like what they've done with Rufus so far. Also, it was a good decision to keep his dog around, as in the original, Cloud puts it down on the roof of Shinra Tower. Obviously, the dog isn't important to Rufus' character or anything like that, but I don't know, it's just cool to have his dog around. It looks really cool and it's got the edgiest name of all time. So yeah, the deal is about to be finalized and Shinra will now be temporary allies throughout the rest of this trilogy. So at this point, I was wondering how this deal was going to get ruined. Surely it wouldn't go through, as it would eliminate like 75% of enemies fought in the original. Imagine if it actually did go through though and Shinra just weren't present for the rest of the trilogy. That would be stupid. Luckily, while the deal is being finalized, Yuffie has got in a position to actually carry out the assassination of Rufus. She has a brief thought of Sonon and throws her boomerang at the president. For some baffling reason, Barrett screams his lungs out for the assassination to stop. Seriously, for what reason would Barrett, of all people, prevent the assassination of the president of Shinra? It's not like he knew about the deal that was taking place, and even if he had the hearing of a bat, he specifies later that he disagreed with the deal. Whatever. Heidegger takes the blow for Rufus. Rufus thinks Cloud was involved, it fucks up the deal, so yeah. Apart from Barrett being an idiot, this whole scene was great. It showed Rufus to be quite logical and fair, and Yuffie to be an incompetent child. To be fair, she probably would have succeeded in the assassination if it wasn't for Barrett. After Rufus fucks off without even attempting to execute or arrest Avalanche, Red says there's a black robe heading towards a boat. Cloud decides to go alone, but is joined by some of the troopers from the 7th Infantry who have formed admiration towards Cloud being their captain. Through this next section, the infantry back you up in combat against other Shinra troopers as everyone sees each other as a threat, as it's known that there's infiltrators within Shinra in stolen uniforms. Probably a bit extreme for everyone to gun each other down, but we need a combat sequence in this chapter, I guess. So far, I've loved the Junon section of the game, but unfortunately for me, it ends on a poor note. The final obstacle before reaching the boat is biker bitch Roche, who has set up an arena with dozens and dozens of Shinra personnel watching, despite everyone's supposed to be on high alert due to an assassination attempt on the president, and also has a band to play jazz music while Cloud and Roche fight. Okay. So I know FF7, the original and the remakes, have a lot of goofy moments, and Roche was obviously shown to be extremely over the top in remake, but for me, this is just a bit too silly and out of place. Like, how would Roche even know that Cloud would have ever gone to this random part of Junon and built an arena in anticipation for it? Sorry, this whole part is just so unnecessary, and unfortunately, this won't be the only time I have a problem with Roche in this game. Alright, enough Roche slander. The fight itself is fine. Once Cloud beats him, he finally is about to reach the boat. But before this, the troopers indicate that they know Cloud is the assassin, which Cloud responds by getting ready to butcher his new loyal friends. However, the trooper says that he was just making a joke. What follows next is a somewhat unexpected emotional scene, where the troopers express how their time under Cloud has brought them more together than ever, ending with Cloud saying that they will meet each other again, hopefully in a certain airship in part 3. I mean, you do see them in a side quest later on, but let's ignore that. So I wasn't sure how I felt about this whole part with the troopers accompanying you to the boat, but this final scene made my feelings on it more positive. It just shows how good the character work is in these games, when you even feel attachment to a group of generic NPC troopers. The final part of this chapter is reuniting with the rest of the party and going aboard the ship en route to Costa del Sol. So in conclusion, chapter 4 is one of my favourite chapters in Rebirth. It, for me, improves on an iconic section from the original, keeping the same charm and adding a few extra things that add a lot of substance, narratively and character-wise, apart from the part at the very end with Roche. Also, let's not forget about the first part of chapter 4 in Under Junon, very solid as well. Great chapter. Instead of a generic military ship the group get on in the original, it's now turned into a cruise ship in Rebirth. I was a bit skeptical of this at first. I like the team being undercover the whole time, and mainly, I think when Genova attacks, the feeling of looming dread mixes well with the gritty, dirty ship to create a strong atmosphere. However, the events of this chapter that I'm about to go into make me think the change was worth it. After Aerith and Tifa are interrupted by Cloud, they were about to discuss how they wanna Cloud. A message goes out around the cruise, announcing that a Queen's Blood tournament will be taking place. Everyone decides to enter and you will go through multiple matches to be crowned champion. unless you suck or are a coward and forfeit. Okay, so I haven't really talked about Queen's Blood yet, and while I can't be asked to go through all the rules, I can say it's extremely fun and addicting. Easily the best minigame in the game out of all 70,000 of them. So of course I enjoyed this whole part of the chapter. Most rounds you will have multiple options on who your opponent will be. For example, in round 2 you can choose to play Tifa, Barrett or Aerith. Once you beat Chadley in the semi-finals, your supposed last match will be against an arrogant, notorious Queen's Blood player called Regina. Once you smoke her, and it seems like you have won the tournament, a final challenger appears.
Not so fast, good captain. I've yet to show my hand.
Red appears in a Shinra uniform to challenge Cloud in a match. He's in the skies because he was refused entry into the tournament for being an animal. Of course, this is a reference to him being undercover, walking around funny on the boat in the original. This was a great moment for Red to have, as maybe players at this point didn't have the same attachment or didn't hold him in high regard as the other party members at this point in the story. I wouldn't be surprised if people liked him a lot more after this scene. I remember seeing that people thought they wouldn't add such a silly part of the game from the original to Rebirth. Hello, there's a lot more goofier things that have been put in this game and remake than that. Once you beat or lose to Red, the party all go for some rest. Surely nothing bad will happen, and it will be a peaceful rest of the journey to Costa del Sol. Yeah, no. Weird Genova-infused beings attack the ship, mainly for the purpose of fusing with the also Genova-infused black-robed men, obviously referencing a reunion. Hojo makes his first appearance in Rebirth, and asks the captain of the ship to let the chaos carry on, as he of course wants a sample of these beings. The party is split up again to help around the ship, culminating with Cloud and Tifa finding Barrett protecting black robes from being turned. Just before I get into the final boss fight, while I think the Genova invasion, or whatever you want to call it, of the ship is fine in this game, I actually do prefer it in the original, which might be an unpopular opinion. I just think I preferred the subtlety and building of tension before fighting Genova. It was genuinely quite eerie. Anyway, the captain starts killing off the remaining black robes. Fair enough, to be honest. Yuffie is disguised as a black robe, by the way. She snuck onto the boat but runs away like a coward when the robed men start infusing with an arm or leg of Genova. You know, I never really understood why there's just a random limb of Genova on this random boat. Feel free to explain it to me. The fight with Genova is great. The design is an eldritch, grotesque abomination, and the music, mainly the first phase, is amazing. Once she's beaten, Sephiroth parts with a cryptic message saying,
Cloud, don't let her fool you.
You might not know what he's waffling about, but that will become more clear in chapter 9. Okay, I'll just say it now. He's messing with Cloud's head, trying to insinuate that Tifa is actually an alien, shape-shifting manifestation of Genova. Just more typical mind tricks from Sephiroth. In conclusion, chapter 5 is a fun chapter, mainly thanks to Queen's Blood. The whole Queen's Blood section and cruise journey in general really gave the feeling that the party were becoming very close and were all on a massive adventure together. My high expectations of the Genova fight were met, but as I said, the build up of the fight missed the eerie feeling as it did in the original. I do like the addition of more emphasis on Genova infused beings being drawn to each other though, although I don't know where these particular monsters came from. Hojo didn't seem to send them. I guess they just went there on their own accord to fuse and get stronger or something. After the traumatic events of the cruise journey, it arrives at Costa del Sol, the passengers acting like they just didn't get invaded by basically aliens. Costa del Sol in the original was a short pit stop before moving on to Corel. Aesthetically one of the better looking towns, but irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. This time round, they actually utilised the resort town and dedicate a whole chapter to it. The party, Tifa and Aerith anyway, decide to go chill on the beach, but before this, they run into Johnny, who I guess would have shown up in this town in particular, and takes you to his run-down, dusty-ass makeshift hotel, and suggests that the group will get into beachwear before going to the beach. And the Kumas go wild.
Fate is so cruel, depriving me of Tifa and beachwear.
Yeah, this is another goofy chapter in this game. It's been like 3 in a row now. The way you unlock beachwear is completing a bunch of mini-games and little side activities with Cloud, Tifa and Aerith. I think now is finally time to address the divisive mini-games. in Rebirth. Personally, I enjoy the majority of them. Some are a bit stinky. I understand why people might get tired of them showing up every 5 seconds, especially the mandatory ones. But honestly, I was more frustrated with the old minigames in the original. There's only a few I dislike in Rebirth. For example, the chocobo gliding one in Cosmo Canyon is bullshit. The Queen's Blood one in Costa del Sol, the puzzle version of Queen's Blood, is a bit annoying. And Gears and Gambits is absolutely terrible. But yeah, for me, I like the minigames overall. Moving on, after you do a few minigames and minor side activities around the resort, everyone will eventually go to the beach, but their fun is swiftly cut short by the emergence of Hojo, who hints that he is here planning something on the beach. Hojo's reason for being here makes more sense than the original, where he's just randomly chilling on the beach, somehow being simped over by multiple women. Here, Hojo is here to collect the specimens created from the emergence of the Black Road Men and these things. To do this, he calls upon an octopus squid-like mech to retrieve the Black Road Men, the merged ones. Of course, the party intervene and splits into 2 groups on which you can choose on what group you want to help out. Regardless of who you choose, everyone bar Cloud is abducted by the mech. Well, Cloud is also about to be abducted as well, but it's saved by Yuffie. At this point, I thought Yuffie was finally about to be used in combat and take down the mech with Cloud, but instead of this, you as Cloud continue to 1v1 the mech, while Yuffie clones Johnny a bunch to deliver the final blow to the mech. Okay, I'd have rather this just be your introduction to using her in combat, but whatever. The mech is defeated and everyone freed. Red tries to murder Hojo, but is stopped by Aerith for no good reason. That would have been a lot of problems gone if Aerith wasn't being stupid here. She literally says that she hates Hojo and would do fucked up things to him if she had the chance in the next fucking scene. But okay, I guess Hojo can't die yet for the plot, and Aerith didn't want to upset any purists. This whole part of the chapter with Hojo on the beach leaves me with a bit of mixed feelings. On my first playthrough, I thought it was a bit messy and a bit too over the top, and I still do feel that to a lesser extent. A few times in Rebirth, I feel that they do go overboard with recreations of scenes from the original game. For example, Nibelheim in the original is very simple, and it's a bit too dramatic in Rebirth. I think the former suited the whole section better. I mean, just compare these. Hojo's just chilling on the beach in the original, and here he summons a giant octopus mech to create these merged beings and collect them. To be fair, it makes sense for him to do this, and the chapter did need a bit of combat in it. On replaythroughs, I don't think of this whole part negatively that much anymore. I just wished Yuffie actually joined the fight at the end, instead of doing whatever the fuck she did. After the fight, you get to converse with the others around the beach, with Aerith's conversation standing out the most. Eventually, everyone decides to rest up in Johnny's shithole hotel, and this is where essentially the chapter ends. So in conclusion, I appreciate them actually doing something with Costa del Sol, rather than just quickly passing through it. It's actually right up there as one of my favourite towns in this game, surprisingly. But yeah, a mixed chapter for me overall. I wasn't really a fan of it on my first playthrough, near the ending of it anyway, but I appreciated it more on my second run. Chapter 7 starts off with Johnny telling Cloud and Barrett that the Black Robes were spotted going towards Mount Corel. Before setting off, Yuffie appears yet again to challenge Cloud to a duel, in which you can tell her to bring it or beat it. Whatever you choose, there's a few dialogue options after to accept her into the group or keep rejecting her. This is of course referencing having to select all the correct dialogue choices in order for her to join you in the original, after you beat the shit out of the 16-year-old in the forest. But of course, in Rebirth, it doesn't actually matter what options you pick in the end, as she's not an optional character this time. Regardless, it's still a funny scene and a good callback to her original recruitment, and yeah, she still of course wants that material. Before going straight to Corel, a few side quests unlock. I'm not going to talk about individual side quests, but I do want to say that the Corel region is probably my favourite one in the game. From its locations, aesthetic, and just general world design. It's split into two. The first half, which resides just outside of Costa del Sol, is kind of an extension to Costa del Sol. What I mean is, zip lines are about, there's a gym, more beaches, palm trees, piers, waterfalls, and so on. Plus you can wear beachwear exclusively in this part of the region. I love the atmosphere here, and the nostalgic rendition of Holding My Thoughts in My Heart is beautiful also. The second half of Corel is inaccessible at this point, so I'll get to that later. As the party reach the base of Mount Corel, it's revealed that Barrett is from this part of the world. Barrett's whole backstory in the original is probably my favourite backstory apart from Cloud's, from his motivation for despising Shinra to the truth about Marlene. So I was anticipating these next couple chapters very much, and expecting Barrett's story to be done justice. The first of these 2 chapters is mostly quite straightforward. It's basically just a journey up Mount Corel to get to Barrett's hometown itself. The journey is absolutely expanded and improved upon though. It starts off with the party splitting up into 2, yet again, of course, because Aerith can't walk uphill for more than 2 minutes. Her, Cloud and Red, who were my main party in general in Rebirth, go up the mountain fighting a bunch of monsters, accompanied by a track that's still stuck in my head to this day. After honestly quite a long time fighting monsters, the trio encounter Rude and Elena on a helipad, but instead of the Turks deciding to get slumped yet again by Avalanche, Elena calls the return of the Valkyrie boss from Remake, albeit a modified flamethrower version of it. This boss is easily one of my standouts in Remake, and its banger theme, and here in Rebirth it's also very enjoyable. But before the 3 move on after beating the Valkyrie, 2 more scenes from elsewhere are shown. The first scene shows a meeting between the different directors of Shinra, similar to Remake. Here, Rufus reveals that the Final Fantasy version of Kaijus, the weapons, have appeared. I'm fine with them introducing weapons this early and explaining their purpose. It's not like the weapons we see in Rebirth are the same Godzilla-sized ones we see in the original. It's just, let's say, lesser weapons we see here. Anyway, Rufus wants the giant materia that the weapons possess in their body, mainly because he believes that Wutai is after them. This is yet again planting more seeds into the conflict with Wutai, something we didn't really see in the original. At the end of this meeting, the only normal director, Reeve, I mean, he's not exactly normal either, is he? Confronts Rufus over his father's previous actions. In response, Rufus scolds the rest of the directors for not trying to even keep his dad in line, yet again showing at this point Rufus's goals aren't exactly like his father's. I've said a lot that the characters are probably the highlight of these remakes, but that's not only talking about the party members, it extends to the villains also. All the directors have been upgraded. Yes, they aren't exactly complex and are mostly cartoonishly evil, but I've seen a lot of morally grey villains more frequently through recent times. Sometimes people are just straight up evil, and writers seem to forget this these days. They make for fun villains. Out of all these directors, Scarlet for me probably stands out the most. No, not because of her huge exposed tits. She was great in Remake's DLC, and she has a couple of memorable appearances in Rebirth as well. See? Just a fun, evil villain. The second scene is returning to Zack for the first time since the very start of the game. He's residing in some random shack with an unconscious Cloud and Aerith, before a worried Elmira barges her way in to check on her adoptive daughter. They decide to take Cloud and Aerith to Elmira's house in the Sector 5 slums, in which on the journey there, Elmira tells Zack that the world is ending. In whatever parallel world or whatever this place is that Zack is in, everything is grey and dead, and the sky looks murky. In the upcoming scenes with Zack, I understand them a bit more, but with this one I don't really have much to talk about on it. The only important thing to note is that the world Zack is in is fucked. Finally, we get back to the trio, who are quickly reunited with the other trio, in which Yuffie gives a bit of exposition on some of the recent history between Shinra and Wutai, which includes a mentioning that Glenn and 2 other unnamed soldiers defected from Shinra and formed an interim government who wanted independence rather than be under Shinra's control. This government revolution was aided by someone called Viceroy Saruf. It's not explicitly said who this is, but from external FF7 media it becomes a bit clearer. They are really setting up for Wutai to play a bigger role in these remakes, which I'm in favour of. By the way, this scene occurs at the ruined Corel reactor. The place is full of Mako, and in this pool of Mako is where we get our first full view of the weapon. Red, being a planet nerd, knows what these are, and that they only appear when the planet is in danger. This gives Barrett to justify him blowing up reactors and being a mass murderer, as the weapons wouldn't show up if the planet hadn't been pushed to the brink, while Yuffie is in the background focused on the giant materia the weapon possessed. Just quickly on Yuffie, Square did a good job on making her more likable than her original counterpart, but also keeping her annoying personality intact. I mean, that might sound a bit contradictory to say she's more likable but still annoying, but in the original there's not really any moments she comes across as likable, just an annoying kid who robs you and seems to not give an actual shit about the party's actual goals or the members themselves. I mean, she's definitely going to rub us in the next part, but towards the end of this game, she does seem to care more about the group than solely just the material. You know, on my replay through, I'm thinking to myself why she's more likable than the original, and I think it's just because she's more funny. Yeah, she's still very annoying on replay through. I was probably more irritated with her than on my first playthrough, but yeah, I just think she has a lot more funnier scenes. Whereas in the original, she was just straight up annoying and irritating, not funny at all. Anyway, I'm going around in circles. What I'm trying to say is she is less irritating than the original, but not sacrificing her annoying character. An upgrade overall. After this, the group come across a mine, which they see some black robes offering themselves because the way is blocked. Cloud gets inspired by his Genova-souled brothers and decides he's feeling suicidal as well. But before he jumps, he's stopped by Barrett and they sit him down to arrest, while Barrett, Yuffie and Tifa make their way up to the mine to bring down the mine rail that's blocking the way. Here you take control of Yuffie as the main party member. The whole journey through up the mine is very enjoyable. When you take control of a character other than Cloud, they all have a minor gameplay feature or gimmick they get. In Yuffie's case, it's a grappling rope, which is used to, obviously, get across large gaps and also solve minor puzzles, and to get to a few optional small areas to look for loot. Nothing crazy, but I appreciate the characters having exclusive minor gimmicks when playing as them as the main party member. At the summit of the mine, the final obstacle is this thing, trying to munch on these little baby birds. These birds are in the original. You can find their nest and take treasure from it, resulting in the mother of the chicks attacking you and you having to butcher it in front of its kids. Yep, felt bad about that when I did it. Anyway, this is another great boss in this chapter. Now the way is cleared for the rest of the group. One of the chicks takes a liking to Barrett and briefly accompanies the group, while the other two chicks just get left behind and probably get eaten off screen. I mean, the party didn't actually kill the Gigatrees, it just flew off somewhere. After a trip down the minecart, everyone reunites along with the chick, who has been named Cloud Jr., thanks to it and Cloud having the same trim. Cloud wants to off himself for the second time in this chapter. The mother of the chick returns and takes Cloud Jr. away, and that's the last we ever see of Cloud Jr. Actually, it's not. He appears in a side quest as well, so yeah. At last, the party enters Corel, which is of course Barrett's hometown, and Barrett's backstory starts to get revealed after getting little mentions of it beforehand. Instead of being straight up decked by one of Corel's residents, Barrett gets humiliated by having a drink poured over him, as every one of his friends, apart from Yuffie of all people, just watch and do nothing. Barrett puts on his shades, which I was wondering where they went. I thought he lost them or something. And he expresses that he can take the shit that his former people throw at him, which obviously shows that he clearly thinks it's deserved, as Barrett isn't exactly known for being patient. As you walk through the decrepit town of Corel, Barrett continues to get heckled. Corel as a town is fine. I wasn't expecting much, as it was basically just a camp in the original. Although while this music rendition of Mark of a Traitor is fitting here, it has sort of a western twist to it. Personally, I prefer the original track. Tifa wants to stop by a doctor's clinic, as the doctor here is the doctor who saved her life from her injury from Nibelheim 5 years ago. Also, this is the same doctor who healed Barrett from him getting lit up 4 years ago. Fair to say that this random doctor who resides in a shithole town kind of changed the course of the world by saving these two characters. On entering the clinic, Cloud goes schizo yet again and tries to cut a black robe in two because he sees Sephiroth in him, but is stopped by Barrett. Once Barrett is done reuniting with Dr. Sheeran, the doctor's attention turns to Tifa, who expresses her gratitude for him saving her 5 years ago. But the doctor tells her to save her thanks, as it was a Shinra helicopter who brought her here. I didn't really understand the point of this whole interaction, but now I realise that this quick look from Cloud is him realising that Tifa's story of Zangan being the one to rescue Tifa is not right, or at least according to him anyway. I mean, I think this is what this scene is trying to convey. I think it's yet another moment of Cloud wondering if Tifa is really her. Dr. Sheeran also shares his knowledge on what he thinks is wrong with the robed men. He thinks they're suffering from cellular degradation and requests a blood sample from Cloud, as all the other robed men have a strange substance in their blood. Cloud, being the mopey, miserable prick, of course refuses. Maybe is scared of needles or something. This is also something Rebirth emphasizes more than the original, the whole angle of Cloud eventually degrading himself. I think the first time Cloud actually loses it in the original is the Temple of the Ancients. He definitely is portrayed as more fucked in the head in this game and remake as well, honestly. We will come back to this, but I just want to mention that Cloud's downward mental spiral is done very well in this game. The group's next destination is of course the Gold Saucer, where Black Robes have been going towards. Always thought it was a bit random how the entrance to the Gold Saucer, a fucking amusement park, was right next to some poor shithole town. Although in Rebirth, you can constantly see helicopters taking people to the Golden Saucer from Costa del Sol and vice versa, so that was cool. The end of the chapter consists of Barrett finally indulging the others on why he's been getting bullied by his former people since entering Corel. His retelling of his backstory is basically one for one, with him backing the construction of the Mako reactor and abandoning using coal, whereas his best friend Dine is the only one wanting to reject the deal. It's funny how everyone in the town only blames Barrett for everything. It's only literally just Dine that doesn't want the reactor. I mean, everyone else here seems to agree with it. I mean, I guess everyone who was involved with the deal got murked, and Barrett is the only one alive to take the blame in the aftermath or something. Anyway, Barrett says he can live with his previous actions, and the group finally make their way up to the Golden Saucer. Easily one of my most anticipated parts of Rebirth. Yeah, I think I've said this for like every other section, but it's the Golden Saucer, come on. To be honest, now that I think about it, the first time you go to the Golden Saucer in the original, I actually think it's one of the weaker parts of that game. You aren't exactly in the saucer for that long. You meet Cat Shit, then you just randomly let him stalk you and join the party. Then you get dumped to Corel prison. Sure, the whole part with Dine is good, but that's about it honestly. The second time you go to the Gold Saucer is when it really shines. In Rebirth, the first time at the saucer is more expanded upon and, to me, straight up better. You actually get time to explore and interact with it properly. And the second half with Corel Prison, while still a weaker part of this game, just like the original, it is also improved upon for the most part. Anyway, let's start from the beginning. After getting through the entrance, an over-the-top play or dance starts, with the 3 female party members being conveniently chosen to get involved. After this, the Saucer's owner Dio, who is juiced up to the eyeballs with steroids, shows up to conveniently challenge Cloud to a virtual fight. And of course Cloud wins because he's literally good at everything. Well, actually you can lose, but you have to be very incompetent to lose that. Instead of paying your life savings on a golden ticket, Dio gifts one to Cloud for the fight they just had. Most of the group decide to have fun at the saucer, while Cloud continues to get mind-fucked by Sephiroth. Barrett and Cloud go to the Haunted Hotel, which is beautifully recreated, and look to book some rooms. Oh right, yeah, I completely forgot about Kate Sith, my bad. Kate Sith is actually way more memorable in Rebirth, unlike the original, where I genuinely forgot he existed half the time. By far the worst character in 1997. He's still a goofy character whose personality or story hasn't really changed, but the way he worms himself into the party is better and more natural, by starting off by trying to get on Cloud and Barrett's good side by buying the rooms for them, and helping the group try and find Barrett in Corel prison. But yeah, let's not go that far ahead yet. So yeah, after Kate Sith, and yes, I'm calling him Kate Sith by the way, that's the way his name is said in the game, not Ketshi. I don't care if it's a dying language, shut up. After he buys Cloud and Barrett rooms, he also gives a bunch of his fortunes once Cloud asks if his fortunes can help find Sephiroth. And the last fortune, just like the original, is about Cloud losing what he cherishes most. Funny that big stoic hardman Cloud is so distressed about some random fortune telling from a pair of toys. I mean, this worrying is warranted by the end of the game, to be fair. Once Cloud and Barrett go to their rooms, Cloud rests while Barrett goes out. Oh yeah, the Turks are also here. It turns out that the rooms bought out by Kate Sith were originally rented out by Elena, Rude and Palmer. I know I said it before, but Elena's voice acting is great. Her scream is crazy. While Cloud naps, we get another scene with Zack, and what on God's earth is happening with him. Unfortunately, I don't have much to say on this Zack scene as well, but the next one in chapter 10, I can piece a bit more of what's going on there. But as for this part, Zack and Elmira and Marlene are sitting around the table, talking about Biggs, the only survivor from Avalanche in this world, and how we visited the house. Marlene starts crying and says that Biggs, Barrett or Tifa will never come back again. Zack is like, nah, and promises to find Biggs. Cloud wakes up to a knock on his door. I was wondering if they moved the iconic date scene from the second visit to the Golden Saucer and moved it to the first visit. The answer is no, but it still is a lesser newly added date, which I think is a good decision. Why not add a smaller scale date for your first time exploring the saucer? You know, I actually just realized that you choose one other person to accompany you on your first time in the saucer in the original, but it wasn't a date, it was just a way of having your party at 2 members before Kate Sith scrapes his way in and makes it a third 20 seconds later. So yeah, I approve of making this a date now. Also, I got Aerith on my first playthrough, by the way, which I was happy with. I wouldn't have cared of who I got anyway. I'm not one of these crazy shippers that think Final Fantasy VII is a dating simulator. Actual unhinged weirdos, but I'll talk more on that later. Back here now. So yeah, with your date or by yourself if no one likes you, you can fully explore the saucer, of course consisting of mainly minigames, which I was kind of mixed on at first. Just like the game overall in general, the minigames are mostly good but have a few stinkers. But once the chocobo racing becomes available, the actual activities you can do in the saucer became positive overall for me. Of course, you can visit the closed theatre and get a nice scene about Jessie once you see a picture of her on the theatre wall, as she used to be an actress here. These scenes are different depending on who's with you on your date. Most of my date consisted of fighting in the battle arena though. Aerith probably wasn't happy with that. Or maybe she was. Yeah, the battle arena is fun. It's essentially an extension on Chadley's VR battles. And just like Chadley's VR battles, the later stages get frustrating. I mentioned chocobo racing just a second ago, however, it's not available just yet. Finally, you can run into all the rejects who aren't with you on your date, and you can berate Tifa on how Aerith is better than her. It's a joke, calm down.
Actually, Tifa is actually the canon date for Cloud.
Shut up. I don't give a shit who the canon date for anyone is. Bro, you shippers are fucking crazy, bro. They actually piss me off. Actual unhinged weirdos. Anyway. This whole segment ends with Cloud and his date making their way to the sky wall, but of course this will be interrupted by a shooting elsewhere in the saucer. Okay, so in the original, of course Dine was the one who shot up the place, but he was not specifically shown to be the perpetrator at this point. All that was revealed to the player is that a man with a gun for an arm did it, and obviously the only person we know matching that description was Barrett. So it was logical to assume he committed this massacre, especially since in the original, when you got to the saucer, Barrett was pissed off. Well, in Rebirth, you're straight up shown that it was Dine that gunned everyone down. It makes it a bit less intriguing. Maybe Square Enix knows that most people that play this game are people that have played the original and they're just like, yeah. They know that it's Dine that did it, we don't need to pretend. But still, it couldn't have hurt to just keep it ambiguous. Another thing that was changed is that Dio doesn't forcefully capture and dump the party in Corel prison for being associated with Barrett. He gives the group an opportunity to prove Barrett's innocence. Again, this would have been better if the game hadn't shown who already did it. It just ruined all mystery. The group head to the elevator to go down to Corel prison, which is apparently where the culprit went. Corel prison is now called the Dust Bowl, and it isn't exactly a prison anymore. It's just a town where former Golden Saucer employees used to reside in, but now it's been taken over by gangs and thugs. To be honest, this probably makes more sense than an amusement park having a cruel prison in the middle of the desert. Once entering the center of the Dust Bowl, the thugs of this town swarm the party, and obviously the party obliterate them. Oh wait, no. Actually, the thugs managed to beat an alleged former soldier, an elite martial artist, an ancient being who uses magic, a ferocious cat dog, and a young but elite ninja. Oh, and a cat robot thing. Yeah, okay. You're really pushing what I can believe here. but plot, I guess. Once everyone is conscious again, a character who may have received the biggest glow up from the original, Gus, makes his appearance and yaps a bunch with his hype man glazing him in the background. He says that he has the culprit of the saucer shooting locked up, and if Cloud wins a shitload of money from winning a chocobo race, he can get access to the prisoner. Corel Prison as a whole was probably my least favourite part of the original, except for the dying part. But the concept of the golden saucer having a rule that if a prisoner can eventually win a chocobo race, they can go free was a bit random. Plus there was annoying enemies in this area. I prefer the new reason of Cloud having to participate in a chocobo race. It just makes more sense. What doesn't make sense is how the party got beaten by a bunch of crackhead thugs. I'm not really going to go into detail about this whole segment, as I want to get into the whole Barrett dying stuff. You run into the kid Billy from the Chocobo Ranch, and Pico. Pico is the Chocobo in the grasslands you tame, by the way. Pico is sick and needs food to be recovered for the upcoming race. You go through the Dust Bowl doing various things to obtain the food. Not very interesting. But what I will say though is the whole feel of the town is very different to the original. It's still run down, but clearly more active. The original was quiet and desolate. I'm fine with both, I just thought I'd point out there are a lot of differences in the two games. Anyway, once feeding the bird, he's recovered, now the chocobo race can begin. Chocobo racing is very fun in this game. I had no fucking clue what was going on in the original. I always just won by luck. It's a lot more fleshed out here and a lot more modernized in a good way. Plus, before the race starts, there's another funny scene with Rude and Eleanor. The Turks have been done very well in these remakes. You win the race and Gus lets you through to the place where the prisoner is locked up. After you fight through a few monsters, a very random sandstorm or tornado appears, as does Barrett. Once it clears, like in 10 seconds, Barrett tells that the perpetrator of the shooting was his thought dead best friend Dine. Wow, what a shock. The flashback scene of what eventually happened to Dine and Corel is recreated well. I like how Scarlet is the one herself to destroy Barrett and Dine's arm, although a nitpick I have is her shooting their arms goes on a bit too long, awkwardly too long. Shinra are so technologically advanced, can create powerful materia, and have been harnessing the planet's life force for years, but have only developed their firearms to the equivalent of BB guns. So following this, of course you take control of Barrett to deal with his former friend. I have been rushing the second half of this chapter, because we all know this is the main event. The original scene was right up there as one of the more emotional scenes in that game, and the same can be said for Rebirth. However, I'm still a bit mixed on the Rebirth version overall in terms of quality. So it starts with Barrett finding Dine tied up. While Barrett tries to free him, Dine mutters a bunch of incoherent sentences, most talking about his dead wife and Thought's dead daughter, Marlene. This is to show that he is crazy, but actually crazy as in completely lost his mind crazy. Unlike the original where, yeah, he was a bit nuts, but he just seemed more broken than actually like fucked in the head crazy, if you get what I mean. And fair enough, his wife got murdered, he thinks his daughter also got murdered, his hometown got burnt down, and he seemingly got a severe head injury when falling like over 100 meters. God knows how he survived that, by the way. Oh, also, one line I wanted to point out from here, from Dine, is that he says Eleanor, his wife, he says that it's his wife's birthday. This is presumably why he shot up the gold saucer, specifically Shinra troopers on that particular day. I'm glad they added this little line, as it was unbelievably convenient how in the original, the one day the party went to the gold saucer is the day Dine decided to shoot it up. I mean, it still is pretty convenient here as well, but at least there's a bit more reason to it now. Barrett frees Dine, who is actually somewhat happy to see him, until Dine spots Cloud with soldier eyes and uniform. Clearly thinking Barrett is still friendly with Shinra, Dine shoots around wildly out of anger, eventually leading into the boss fight. The boss in Rebirth starts before the two former friends actually talk to each other properly, contrary to the original. The boss fight itself, I don't know if this is a controversial take, but I enjoyed it. There's only so much you can do with a boss fight where only guns are involved. Well, his third phase exists. So his third phase, when he somehow grows tendrils out of his gun arm with lasers and shit, it's fun from a gameplay perspective, but I do think it's a bit over the top for him to turn into a Resident Evil looking boss. Like, what the fuck is this? This whole part is supposed to be serious, not goofy. Anyway, overall I enjoyed the boss. After it, Dine doesn't give up and Barrett can't be asked to fight his best friend anymore, telling Dine to kill him. Barrett's had a rough life, so yeah, him fighting his former best friend to the death probably warrants Barrett saying this. Instead of killing him, Dine beats the shit out of him, then saying how he can hear his dead wife, telling him that Barrett isn't at fault. It does seem like Dine does know this deep down. He then shifts his anger at Shinra once again. During this, Shinra troopers spawn in. I'm presuming they are here to capture Avalanche. Dine guns a bunch of them down, while the rest of the party help out in the background. During this, Barrett had tackled Dine to save him from gunfire. I mean, you did just light him up about 5 minutes ago, Barrett. From here until Dine's death is where the real meat of this whole scene is. Dine says how much he misses his dead wife and daughter, and how he wants to, but can't off himself. Finally, Barrett reveals that Dine's daughter is alive, and passes him over a photo of her. Like in the original, there's no dramatic, explicit reveal that Marlene is in fact not Barrett's real daughter, but of course it's subtly alluded to, definitely enough to realise what's going on. This whole part with the reveal to Dine, and the following monologue on how Barrett saved Marlene and loves her as his own is brilliant. The acting is great, beautiful music and great shots make this part quite emotional. Dine, still being crazy, keeps trying to cause conflict with Barrett, scolding him for taking his kid from him. Barrett pleads that they can go and visit Marlene right now, however Dine is too far gone and realises the atrocities he's committed, saying that he can never hold his daughter again. Yeah, so unlike the original, he doesn't want to off Marlene in order to rejoin her with her dead mother. Honestly, I liked how dark and fucked up that was, but I don't mind the change of him being more emotional over his daughter. I mean, he was very cold and honestly didn't seem to care that much when finding out that Marlene was alive in the original. Unfortunately, Dine's death is a bit meh. His final moments in the original was probably the standout part of that scene, with his touching final words before he launches himself off a cliff. I mean, the last time he fell off a cliff, he survived. Who's to say he didn't miraculously survive that again? Anyway, this time round, Dine shoves Barrett over to get him out of the way of Shinra gunfire, I guess. Or he was just mad at Shinra troopers and wanted Barrett to get the fuck out of the way. Anyway, he kills all of the troopers, but also gets blasted a bunch as well. I mean, Barrett completely smoked him earlier. He should be dead by now anyway. Guns aren't very consistent in FF7. But yeah, this results in his death. His final words are spiteful to Barrett, showing that he still hasn't fully forgiven him, despite pretty much just saving him. He's definitely bipolar or something at this point. His final words are to his dead wife, then he passes. Okay, so overall I am a fan of this recreation of this whole part. As I mentioned before, the original tone is very somber, and this new one is a lot more dramatic and theatrical. Dine has lost it in both versions, but in different ways. He's quite mellow in the original and erratic in Rebirth. The way the scene plays out on the original is quite simple and grounded. Rebirth is, to be honest, absolutely all over the place. This is my main problem with the new version. It's just a bit too messy for me. Barrett frees Dine, Dine gets pissed, grows a mutated Resident Evil arm, gets beat, Barrett backs down, Dine beats him up, stops, Shinra get involved, Barrett tackles Dine, they have an emotional moment, Dine hates Barrett again, shoves him over, kills Shinra troopers getting shot in the process, falls on Barrett, cursing him, dies. I know I just basically explained that whole scene again, but I'm trying to get across how overboard and, again, messy it is when comparing it to the original. Rebirth does this a few times, where reimagined parts of the original just go a bit too far, they do a bit too much. For example, chapter 11 has a lot of that. It's like Square sometimes doesn't realise that simple can be more effective than just going completely over the top. For me, the quiet, subtle tone of the original Dine scene works better. Now, what Rebirth does do better for me is, overall it is more emotional. The acting and music are great, the dialogue for the most part is very good. To be honest, while the original scene is sad, it's only the very end of it that hit me. Rebirth is consistently more emotional. I think Dine being more happy and relieved that his daughter is alive, rather than wanting to murder her, contributes to this a lot. So yeah, overall, I probably like the scenes equally, despite being honestly very different. Anyway, right after this, the rest of the party fights Palmer in a giant frog mech who temporarily pops out to shake his lard ass at the screen. Yep, this is a crazy tonal shift to an unbelievable degree. Don't get me wrong, the boss and the music is quality, but the first time I did this, I felt nothing. Once Palmer is dealt with, everyone reunites with Barrett, who's kneeling over his dead friend. Steroid Man bursts his way through with a familiar looking buggy, accepts that he was in the wrong about Barrett, flexes his muscles over Diane's dead body, and gifts the buggy to the group as an apology for jumping to conclusions. Everyone gets in the buggy apart from Cloud, who picks up Barrett's gun, telling him,
Well, we're here for you.
To help take the load off, huh?
I mean it, man.
I really love this small interaction. What started off as an untrusting relationship between the two, with both of them clearly disliking each other, culminating in this was a very nice 180. What follows is the group getting chased down by Shinra, where you control Barrett in the back of the buggy, shooting troopers on bikes, helicopters and Palmer's frog mech once again. Initially, I was not a fan of Shinra being so involved at the end of this chapter. However, on replaythroughs, I've come around to it. Well, maybe not gameplay wise though. Controlling Barrett and the buggy at the same time is extremely awkward. The group finally get away after driving in circles for about 10 minutes, as the map isn't big enough to drive in a particular route for that long. The final shot shows Barrett's picture of Marlene, placed in the cold dead hands of her real father. Okay, so there's a few more things that happen in this chapter. I'm gonna rush through it because I've been on this chapter for ages. Chapter 13 is gonna take like 4 years. Reeve is shown to be forging wanting posters of the Avalanche members. Also, I think he's singing the Kate Sith theme with a Kate Sith model in the background. I don't have a problem with Reeve implied to be connected to Kate Sith this early. Rufus changes his mind about pursuing Aerith to use her to reach the Promised Land. He's interrupted by Glenn once again. You know what, I'll speak more on this and Glenn towards the end of the video. I can't be arsed right now. And Zack in his world finds Biggs. That's it, there's not much to say there. And finally, the group are blindly wandering around the desert in their new buggy, looking for any signs of black robes to follow. Yuffie gets car sick and Kate Sith does his stupid ass dance and gives a fortune about mushrooms, which leads him to suggest travelling to Gongaga as there's a ruined reactor there. Kate Sith officially joins the party, and that's the end of chapter 8. Chapter 9 covers the optional area of Gongaga from the original. There was not much of note here, there was just another ruined reactor which killed a bunch of the inhabitants of the nearby Gongaga village, which is of course the actual hometown of Zack. We didn't even know who Zack was at that point. And Scarlet shows up to collect something from the ruined reactor. Oh yeah, and there's a random fight with Rude and Reno as well. So this was always a part of Rebirth I was intrigued about, as Square Enix had the opportunity to go crazy and just do whatever the fuck they wanted with this part especially. And I have to say, when I think about the 14 chapters that are in this game, this one is probably my second favourite. The chapter starts with Cloud having a feeling that he's been here before when standing at the entrance to the Gongaga jungle. Well, this is because he has, albeit being there while he was a vegetable on Zack's bike in Crisis Core. Entering the jungle, you are greeted by one of the best tracks in the entire game, and entirely original as well. The atmosphere in the jungle is also the best of any region, but what isn't the best is the level design and exploration of it. The main way of traversing in the Gongaga region is finding these giant mushrooms to bounce on your chocobo to get to different parts of the region. I wanted to die when trying to figure out how to get everywhere. However, I can't hate the region despite this. The music, the atmosphere, and simply the look of the jungle outweighs the cancer of the traversal. For me anyway. Once reaching the entrance of the actual Gongaga village, a bunch of scrubs surrounds the group, acting like they could hurt the group in any way. Well, they probably could since the party just got bodied by a group of thugs in the previous chapter. Among these dorks is a familiar face in Cisne, the Turk from Crisis Core. I thought she would be involved in this game in some fashion. Her being in Gongaga makes sense. She's probably here specifically because she had enough of Shinra after hearing about Zack's death and went to his hometown to look after it for her dead friend. During this reveal, she recognizes Cloud and also seemingly Kate Sith. Obviously she knows Cloud from his time as a vegetable, and she must know about this stupid cat robot being affiliated with Shinra. Though he tells her to shut up, most likely to get her to not bait out he's a spy or some shit. I don't know why Cissnei wouldn't say anything though, she's seemingly not with Shinra anymore. Anyway, I don't know. Cissnei gives a bit of backstory on the town and the ruined reactor, and says that everyone can rest in the village. Oh yeah, also Crisis Core music plays throughout this, which is cool. The party will split off and do their own thing. You can talk to everyone for affinity points here. To progress, you visit Aerith in a random house, but of course this isn't just any ordinary house. It's in fact owned by the parents of Zack. When Zack's mother asks Cloud if he knows about Zack, Cloud says no because he's a retard. After a couple minutes of conversing, Cloud and Aerith leave. Aerith explains how Zack was her first love and how rude it was of her, the way she brought her old memories of Zack back to his parents. Tifa enters the scene and Cloud tells Aerith,
"Leaving you out in the cold like this? Forget about that loser."
yeah, okay, I know you are mentally challenged, Cloud, but you need a slap for that. I won't forget. Yeah, okay buddy, okay. Cloud fucks off and Aerith concludes that Cloud definitely doesn't know who Zack is, which Tifa responds with a confused look on her face, as well as having a few words, which we can't hear, with Aerith. This part here is actually quite significant for reasons I'll get into in a couple chapters time. Cloud goes to bed and is awoken by a loud roar. The party logically deduce that it's from a weapon, as the sound is coming from the reactor. Cissnei tells them that the survey team tried having the reactor inspected, but was stopped by strange looking black wisps. She's obviously talking about Whispers from Remake, who were seemingly permanently defeated at the end of that game. Personally, I didn't love or hate the Whispers, but when I first saw this about how they were back, I was a bit skeptical, as I thought they should have just stayed dead. But with what I'm going to mention in a few minutes, I'm actually quite content with bringing them back. Also, Cissnei can apparently see them, to the confusion of Red. I don't really know what this means that she can particularly see them. So the boys decide to visit the reactor, no girls allowed. They can go cook in Cissnei's kitchen or something. The boys reach the entrance and a Whisper appears, but looking slightly different, being more black rather than grey, and having a purple orb in their face hood thing. The reason I'm fine with the Whispers coming back is because now they are clearly controlled by Sephiroth. I think people forgot that he absorbed them after the party killed the main Whisper Donnie, the Harbinger. He used the party to defeat Fate so he could absorb them. Anyway, after fighting through the rundown reactor for a while, the party reached the center of the reactor, witnessing a swirl of Whispers. Cloud is shown to be affected by the overpowering Mako fumes, and a fat-ass Shinra aircraft called a Relnica appears and looms over the reactor. Scarlet is on this vessel to recover the materia from the weapon, as alluded to earlier in the Shinra meeting in Chapter 7. Barrett suspects Kate Sith is a rat, which she definitely is, but probably not in this case. Scarlet unleashes monsters, experiments of Hojo on the party, including a boss fight which might be the same but different looking Cthulhu looking boss from the first game. I don't know, maybe not. Regardless, it's another good boss fight, the first of 2 in this chapter. Scarlet launches herself out of the Relnica with her mech from the DLC in Remake, while Cloud still struggles from the Mako fumes. She lets a big shot off at the party, mainly at Barrett, and it cuts to white. So yeah, as you can see, comparing all of this to the original is night and day. Back in Gongaga, the girls see the Relnica and suspect the boys are in danger. They make their way through the reactor, albeit through a slightly different route. I don't have a problem with going through the reactor twice. Fighting through it both times was enjoyable. Plus, I kind of do like how the boys and girls were segregated and were given time to shine on their own. Also, Tifa is the party leader here, which is fitting, as we will see soon that this chapter is kind of her chapter. The girl party reach the center and take the pressure off the struggling male party, also bringing back Yuffie's past rivalry with Scarlet. Barrett and Scarlet also seem to have a bit more of a personal rivalry now, as she's the one who's explicitly pretty much the one who ruined his life. Hopefully him and Yuffie will be the ones to kill her in part 3. The rematch with Scarlet and her mech is very cool. I think I said this earlier, but Scarlet has really shone as one of the supporting villains in these remakes. Also, the game is not that hard, even in hard mode, apart from the later VR missions. But this boss in hard mode, the second phase mainly, is one of the tougher fights. Scarlet focuses her attention on the weapon after being beat. Tifa gets separated from the other two and tries to get to Scarlet, but ends up swinging about like a monkey. A Mako stoned Cloud sees Tifa in danger, and what follows is For me, exceptional. And completely original as well, proving that Square does not have to follow every single beat from the original to be good. Cloud is halted on his way to Tifa by generic troopers. Sephiroth tells Cloud to give in to the rage. There's a quick flash of Sephiroth's eye in the same place as Cloud's eye, and Cloud assumes Sephiroth's trademark stance before dispatching of all the NPCs using Sephiroth's moves and mannerisms. The final trooper being brutally impaled as Tifa tells Cloud to chill the fuck out. Like she hasn't seen Cloud slice up hundreds of people before. Tifa tries to comfort Cloud, but Sephiroth is clearly possessing Cloud as if that wasn't obvious enough, reiterating that ain't Tifa.
She has no scar.
You have no scar.
She's not
You're not Tifa. You can't be.
Tifa tries to show off her scar to prove it's really her, but Cloud is too brainwashed at this point and tries to cut her in half, thinking she's a manifestation of Jenova. He of course doesn't end up killing her because fans would be pissed, but she does get dunked into the pool of Mako and munched on by the weapon. So yeah, I love this scene. It's the culmination of Sephiroth trying to turn Cloud against Tifa, which actually almost ends in her death. Plus here and later in the game, we see that Sephiroth has way more control over Cloud than even the original, and the way Cloud being possessed, Cloud assuming Sephiroth's stance and fighting like him is sick. Also, I love the framing here of Sephiroth being the devil on Cloud's shoulder when edging him to kill Tifa. Luckily for Tifa, the weapon decided not to chew its food before swallowing. She's stuck in the giant materia orb of the weapon, which is itself swimming through the livestream with another identical weapon with it. There's also a bunch of whispers seemingly escorting, but these are not the black ones controlled by Sephiroth. Tifa sees a few locations from Nibelheim, which each gives her a flashback and visions of her childhood. One is the promise Cloud made to Tifa, one is where Cloud is being left out and being an awkward loner, and the last one being Cloud trying to stop a disillusioned Tifa from crossing the fragile bridge to find her recently deceased mother. If you think this whole part is familiar, it's because it's very reminiscent of when Cloud and Tifa fall into the livestream in the original, and where Cloud's mind is at last fixed. Very interesting to give Tifa a small version of this. It serves as an enticing appetizer to the eventual scene with Cloud in the livestream. Also, Tifa already having this experience within the livestream will make her fixing Cloud's mind make more sense, as she now already has the experience with this weird livestream memory shit. After swimming some more, a dome of black whispers swirl and Sephiroth emerges in the center of it. He seemingly firstly seems to assassinate Tifa but misses. However, the livestream or Mako starts pouring in, starting to drown her. Sephiroth shifts his attention on attacking the weapon itself, which he clearly struggles with. Look at the realization on his face when he realizes he can't just one-shot everything. Also, the two sets of whispers, the white and black ones, seem to be clashing against each other. The weapon is injured but still alive, whereas Tifa is hanging on for dear life. She gets visions of important people to her, telling her to fight for her life, ending with each of them offering a hand to her. Something that I want to mention on this, which could be completely meaningless and I could just be looking way too into it, is that Aerith is the last one to reach out to Tifa, also being the only one that Tifa can see clearly. Again, this could be absolutely nothing, but spoiler, it's pretty much confirmed later that the whispers, the white ones, not being controlled by Sephiroth, are controlled by Aerith. Not the Aerith we know in Rebirth though, but if you hadn't have noticed by now, Aerith is like Sephiroth in the remake series, as in she has knowledge on previous events from the original game. It's hard to explain, but it seems like Aerith and Sephiroth's original versions are in the livestream warring against each other. That's why Aerith in remake knew things, because she was given knowledge from her original self, probably through the holy material. Aerith did say that she lost that knowledge earlier though, when the whispers left. Maybe this is because when Sephiroth got control of the whispers, now being in control of them, he wiped the memories from Aerith or something like that, and that's why the white materia is now clear. I don't fucking know. But yeah, maybe this final shot of Aerith is alluding to that she is the one who's actually saves Tifa here, the original version of Aerith anyway, by making the weapon surface. Maybe I'm completely overthinking it, but there's been a lot of times, especially in the Zack chapters, where I've said, I don't know what the fuck's going on, so I need to give some theories at some point. Also, she gets one more vision of Cloud following Sephiroth, implying that he's under his control now. Now, why is Sephiroth so determined to make Cloud turn on Tifa and even try killing her himself. Well, as I said earlier, this Sephiroth most likely knows that Tifa is instrumental in fixing up Cloud, which in turn makes Sephiroth's mental grasp on Cloud diminish a bunch. Sephiroth wanting to prevent Tifa from being able to do this makes it logical to try and kill her. I think all of this is a great addition to the story, a teaser of the upcoming livestream sequence with Tifa and Cloud, seeing Sephiroth trying to off Tifa while also battling a weapon and struggling, and quite an emotional end with everyone close to Tifa reaching out to her. They really went out with this optional 10-minute section of the original. The weapon surfaces to return Tifa. Barrett deservedly bitch slaps Cloud. After this crazy segment, Tifa, like me, after all of that, needed to have a rest. When Tifa wakes up, she explains to Cloud that when she went over the bridge that resulted in it falling and putting her into a coma, that these 3 other dumb kids lied about how it was Cloud who egged her on to go across the bridge. But of course, this is not what happened. Tifa saw the opposite in the livestream and knew Cloud was there for her. Cloud goes into how his mind is cooked and presumes it's because of his degrading cells. Tifa basically tells him how it won't happen to him, telling him now that it's her turn to save him. Cloud and Tifa shippers, then go on suicide watch because Yuffie and Kate Sith interrupt her upcoming kiss, and Aerith says something that we can't even hear or attempt to lip read to Tifa. I don't know how important this could be for it to be muted. So I do really like this scene, don't get me wrong. After what she saw from Cloud in the livestream, she clearly has a deeper connection towards him now, and is determined to help him. The only thing that bothers me is that he did just try and fucking cut you in half like 2 hours ago. You gonna mention or be worried about that? You know what, I can understand Tifa glossing over it, as she must have made the connection through the livestream vision of Cloud and Sephiroth, that Sephiroth has power over him. But why did none of the party members even acknowledge that Cloud just tried to murder his childhood friend? Did they not see it or something? Anyway, Tifa explains that she saw the Whispers having a race war in the livestream, and that the planet was winning. Red suggests that they all journey to Cosmo Canyon to learn more. Cissney gives info on a pilot who can take them there, and they all head to the airstrip. Who could be this pilot, I wonder? Yeah, it's obviously Sid, making his first appearance way more early than the original at Rocket Town. Unfortunately, as of right now, I'm not very happy with what's been done with Sid. It's not even the same character. He's way nicer and friendlier, barely showing any familiar personality traits from the original character. I do have hope for the final part though. I have a theory that when we get to Rocket Town, he'll be reminded of his failures and his ruined dream through the Rocket and Shira, and show his true grumpy, abusive self. Chapter 9 ends with Roche willingly undergoing a procedure from Hojo. Hojo is injecting something purple into him, which tends to be the colour associated with Jenova. As I said earlier, Square Enix are capable of making quality original parts to these remakes. For example, the mission with Biggs, Jessie and Wedge in Remake was completely original and great too. Purists hate it, but do you really just want a complete 100% faithful remake of FF7 with nothing new or intriguing added? Don't worry, I'll be getting into the multiverse shit that I'm not a fan of at the end, but you got to admit that the majority of original parts added to Remake and Rebirth are pretty quality. At this point in the game, just a bit over the halfway mark, I was thoroughly enjoying myself, pretty much addicted. However, these next 2 chapters is where the first real slump occurs, and unfortunately, these next 2 chapters cover parts of the original, which I really enjoyed. Cosmo Canyon, while not a location where there's massive plot or anything, was memorable for different reasons. The aesthetic was unique to any other town, the lore of it being the home of planetology, and of course the music. And while I said that narratively, the town does not serve much to the main plot, the revelation of Red and his father is probably the saddest scene for me in the entire game. Yeah, most people would probably say Aerith's death, but I was spoiled on her death years before I even knew what FF7 truly was. Cosmo Canyon in Rebirth follows much of the same plot points and aspects of the original, with again extra added stuff like, for example, there's a lot of new lore on the gear and the black material. In fact, in Rebirth, Cosmo Canyon is substantially more important to the main plot than the original. So, saying this, why do I say that this chapter is disappointing? Well, for one reason.
Hey! Guys, it's me! I'm back!
No exaggeration, Red's new voice is genuinely my biggest gripe with this game. I know Red is a teenager, but this does not mean you have to change his voice to sound like an annoying anime character. I don't watch anime, but this is what 50% of every anime voice I've ever heard of sounds like. You know what? Very rarely this voice doesn't sound too bad, like here.
When our village came under attack, my mother fought with courage, with honor. She faced the enemy and laid down her life to save us. My father, though, he turned tail and ran. He was a coward.
But for the most part, he's hyper and spews cringe dialogue during combat. His new voice mixed with these new lines make me want to swing from a rope. Red is right up there as one of my favourite characters in the original and in these remakes up until here. So yeah, I wasn't happy to hear his cool old man voice switch to this for the rest of the game. You know what would have been better? If he kept his gruff voice but acted more like an excited teenager. There would have been an opportunity to make his scenes a bit funnier, sounding like an old man but occasionally letting his teenage personality out, resulting in a humorous contrast. This is a very small example, but something like this. It doesn't even sound like a teenager, it sounds like a grown man trying to imitate a child's voice. No disrespect to the voice actor though, it is impressive that he can do these two vastly different voices. So it might sound petty to you, but yeah, a fictional cat dog's voice changing really soured me on this entire chapter. I just could not get over it. I'm not going to spend much time on what happens for most of this chapter. As I said before, it follows the same beats of the original very closely. Bugenhagen gives his presentation on the planet and the live stream. It turns out that his big ball for legs is actually a giant orb of materia. He's also very grumpy in this game. You go through the cave of the Gi, of course. Only Red and an observer go through it. As in Rebirth, it's a trial for Red this time, the journey through the cave. Barrett is the one who accompanies Red on this trial. Makes sense as these two have developed a buddy cop relationship. Maybe Aerith would have made a bit more sense though. The journey through the cave is good. Fighting the Gi is fun and you get some needed lore on them. We pretty much knew nothing about them in 1997. And Gi Natak, the final boss of the dungeon, is right up there as one of my favourite fights in this game. The music is crazy as well, which is funny because I remember this fight being, from what I remember, being very annoying in the original. So yeah, fair to say he got an upgrade, and this isn't the last we'll see of him. Before I get to the main event, up until this point, the only newly added scene of note is Aerith gives a cringe speech to a bunch of people about her having a shit life, but now she's happy now. Right, I love Aerith, but come on, it's a cringe, sappy speech that no one asked for. She even says it herself. Even Cloud can tell her to shut the fuck up. Watching this always makes me laugh.
That's enough.
It's okay. I'll keep going.
Seriously though, it's fine. Everyone who's played the original knows we're getting close to her upcoming demise. And a speech like this might hit hard for some people, I guess, knowing she's gonna get an underwater burial soon. Okay, so back to the Cave of the Gi. Red learning about the truth of his father it's done well. It looks beautiful, I mean, look at this. The sad rendition of the Cosmo Canyon theme hits, and the final shots of Red's father crying and Red howling does its job at making you shed a tear. But this scene, yep, you guessed it, is sadly brought down by Red's new voice. Sorry, but that's just how I feel. It's just incredibly jarring, I'm sorry. You know, one benefit I will give to this new voice, it does make you feel like Red needs to be protected and looked after more, like the child he is. A big difference from him being a cool old cat dog. For example, his trial scene in chapter 13 is probably made a bit more sadder than if he kept his old voice and personality. But this is what I mean, it's not just a voice change, it's a whole personality change to what I knew and loved. And it's also a bullshit excuse on why he used his old voice in the first place. He wanted to be seen as an equal. What kind of fucking bullshit is this? Okay, let me just stop. So this should have been the end of the chapter if the game was entirely faithful, but the Gi leader, who has recovered from the beating that Red and Barrett just gave him, appears and asks the party to follow him. Also, Sephiroth does the same for Cloud in his mind. The party follow and get on a small boat floating on a large lake of Mako. During this, we cut back to another part in Zack's world, and finally I can get a little out of this alternate world scene. Zack and Biggs are discussing how they cheated death. Both mention how the wind started blowing just before they were meant to die. As they converse some more, it's made clear that they are not of the same world or timeline or whatever the fuck you want to call it.
So, how's Cloud holding up?
Mako poisoning's done a real number on him. Doubt he's in for a speedy recovery either. But hey, hope springs eternal.
Right. If he does recover, you can bet your ass he'll act like it was nothing. Shrug it off and say he's been through 10 times that shit.
Are we talking about the same Cloud?
In fact, we can tell through this dialogue that this is the Biggs we know from Remake, not an alternate version of him. And also Elmira and Marlene are from Remake as well, since they know who Cloud is, and later obviously Marlene remembers the vision Aerith gave her in Remake. Once Zack gets back to the house and to Aerith, he says that he knows that it was Aerith that caused the wind to save his life, which also implies that the all-knowing god version of her out there, maybe in the live stream or wherever she is, also saved Biggs too. So in the final chapter, we get a clear implication that this all-knowing version of Aerith, yep, this really does sound like fanfiction. She can pretty much transport people between worlds. So in Zack's case, I get why she does this when she does. I'll discuss this in the final chapter, but I really can't tell you why she decided to transport Biggs here. The guy's useless in this game. So yeah, some things are slightly clearer in this alternate world section than the others. The scene ends with Zack holding the comatose Aerith's hand, which the Aerith that we know can feel when her hand is in the live stream. I guess every world is connected through the live stream or something like that. I have a feeling that the timelines or worlds aren't as you see them as in other multiverse stories. Like maybe these worlds are purgatories for the souls in the live stream. But then why would the characters be... do you know what? I don't know. I'll theorize on this stuff at the end with the whole multiverse shit. But I really don't get the whole multiple worlds thing, even when Sephiroth yaps about it for 7 hours at the end of the game. The boat docks at the village of the Gi. I love the aesthetic of this place. Very tribal decor everywhere, and even blood all over the floor. You don't see much of that in this game. Blood, I mean. Gina Tuck mentions that he and his people were rejected by the livestream when they died, meaning they are eternal. Tifa mentions that you might have to be born of the livestream to be able to return to it, implying that the Gi are essentially aliens. Fighting through the village, spirits of the Gi start waffling about how they want salvation through the materia of peace. This materia they are talking about is the black materia, the materia that summons Meteor to destroy the world. Cloud senses Sephiroth here also, implying that he is obviously interested in the material. Also in this little bit of dialogue during combat, Gina Tuck confirms that the Gi are actual aliens. I really like that new lore. Gina Tuck explains that the Gi created the black materia and that the Cetra stole it from them and hate them for it. Brother, why are you surprised? Your materia destroys the planet. Just because you're salty that you can't get into the live stream doesn't mean you can kill billions of people. Embrace being immortal, bro. It's not like you're in hellfire or something. Enjoy being undead. He asks the group to retrieve it for them and transports them back to where Seto is, Red's father. Red says one last goodbye to his father, and the group decide to retrieve the materia, not for the Gi, but because Cloud believes Sephiroth is after it. Great new addition here. A shitload of new lore on the Gi. Them being aliens like Genova was very unexpected and cool. I mean, they aren't exactly similar. Genova is a crazy, parasitic, alien, eldritch, shape-shifting bitch. But yeah, both aliens. And getting backstory on the creation of the black materia is appreciated too. Although I have no idea on how a materia could be created for the purpose of summoning a meteor. Maybe the meteor is a piece of their former world that got destroyed. The group ask Bugenhagen about the Temple of the Ancients, the place Gina Tark believes the materia resides. And the 500-year-old master planetologist says he doesn't know where it is, but he knows it does exist. Yeah, thanks a lot, you fossil. Kate Sith needs a terminal to determine the temple's location. The one in Cosmo Canyon has been turned into a windmill, so he needs another one. Luckily, a random black robe has stumbled into the canyon and mumbles out the name of Cloud and Tifa's childhood town, Nibelheim. Cat shit remembers that the village has a terminal, and off they go. See what I mean when I say the chapter itself is genuinely quite good. 75% of it is similar to the original, which is a good thing, and the other 25% is new expanded welcome additions, which make Cosmo Canyon more relevant to the actual main plot. Unfortunately, 100% of the chapter has Red's new baby voice in it, which brings down everything. Don't worry, I'm not going to complain about it any longer, and the voice after this didn't hinder any of my enjoyment on the remaining chapters, despite me still not being used to it. It's just the utter shock and disappointment of the change that taints this chapter. Before I end, I didn't really speak on Cosmo Canyon or the region itself, because I was too busy having a mental breakdown on Red's voice. The town itself is beautiful, there's a crazy amount of native style decor, and it's probably the largest settlement in the game. I don't have a problem with it being more of a tourist spot. I did kind of get that impression with it in the original. It's just more emphasized here. But the only complaint I have about the actual town is that the iconic music just doesn't hit as much as the original. It just doesn't have that same kick. It's a lot more mellow in Rebirth. And as for the Cosmo region, by far the worst region, the only one I actually dislike. The traversal was more frustrating than Gongaga for me. That gliding minigame is atrocious. I always liked the return to Nibelheim. It was an odd moment in the story, obviously because we thought Nibelheim would have been nothing but ruins. Inspecting the buildings in the village revealed that the black-robed men were everywhere. We are not seen anywhere near the amount of black robes here at this point in the story, especially compared to Rebirth. This, with Nibelheim still standing, and also the few inhabitants currently residing in the village, denying anything about knowing what happened to Nibelheim in the past, makes the return to Nibelheim somewhat eerie. On returning to Nibelheim in Rebirth, it loses a lot of that unsettling feeling. The town is now flooded with black robes, as well as a lot of new villagers. Also, it's revealed straight away that it was rebuilt by Shinra, rather than leaving it ambiguous to why the town isn't dead and buried. Later on in the classic game, you do find out it was rebuilt by Shinra, and the few inhabitants there are there for the purpose of covering up what happened 5 years ago. Now, it's just been repurposed as a treatment center for Mako poison victims. This change completely erases the eerie feel of the original, which, as I said, one of the main aspects I liked most about the Nibelheim sequence back then. Now, saying that, it's not all bad. Cloud and Tifa's return to Nibelheim has positive moments. Aerith steals Tifa's spot and has a good conversation with Cloud. To be honest, all the optional dialogue with the party members are good here. I was looking forward to see what had become of Cloud's old home. What I was met by was a whale who burst my eardrums with her non-stop singing. Sometimes I wish we could kill NPCs. And the most important part, as Cloud enters the inn, he gets a flash of Zack walking up the stairs. He follows and enters the inn bedroom. What follows is Cloud having a memory unlocked of him conversing with Zack about Aerith. He remembers Zack and some details about him, remembering that he was with Cloud 5 years ago on a mission to the Nebo reactor. Well, this is a massive change. The first time we even saw Zack in the original was briefly at the Northern Crater when Sephiroth was messing with Cloud's mind again, and we get the revelation about Zack later in the livestream sequence. Fair to say I was very skeptical about Cloud remembering all of this right now, but as we will see in a minute, there's still a lot of intrigue and mystery about Zack. It does not ruin the eventual livestream scene we will see in the final part. Meanwhile, Cat Shit has been on a terminal trying to get the location of the Temple of the Ancients. However, he needs to get to another terminal within Shinra Manor. To get to Shinra Manor, we need a keycard from the executive who is currently at the Nebo reactor. So Cloud, Tifa and Yuffie are the ones who journey to the reactor. Yuffie is a bit of a random pick here, but she's needed for something later. Near the start of the ascent to the mountain, Cloud gets a memory of the Shinra trooper who got swept away and presumably died 5 years ago. However, his mind switches this generic trooper with Zack, which makes Cloud come to the conclusion that this is where his best friend died 5 years ago. Yep, this is definitely how Super Soldier Zack died. He got swept away by a current, screaming like a bitch. Yeah, obviously this isn't what happened. This is what I mean when I say that Cloud remembering Zack this early doesn't ruin the eventual revelation in the livestream. Sure, Cloud remembers who he is, but his memory of him is still wrong and distorted. He still believes that he was in Zack's shoes in Nibelheim 5 years ago, and remembers nothing about Zack's sacrifice. Plus, Tifa goes along with Cloud's story about how Zack died. At first I was wondering why she was doing this, considering she knows it's bullshit, but I realised she's most likely doing it to try and not mess up Cloud's mind even more by telling him he's talking shit. Although I wonder if she did just grow a spine and tell him the truth. Would Cloud remember what actually happened? I guess Tifa is just scared of Cloud losing it again. Also, she might think his mind is somewhat improving, based on the fact he even remembers Zack in the first place, when before this, he started spazzing out every time he heard his name. Or she thinks his mind is slowly fixing itself, with her aid also. But regardless, it's still quite a substantial change from the original, but still not ruining it at the same time. If Cloud remembered everything here, then it would have been a disaster. But no, luckily for the sake of the plot, his brain is still mush. Continuing on through the mountain, they come across the same Mako Spring that they did 5 years ago. Cloud starts mimicking the same lines that Sephiroth said here, showing more signs of possession from him over Cloud. As I said before, I appreciate the heavier emphasis on Cloud's mind being corrupted by Sephiroth throughout the story. It's way more prevalent than in the original. The rest of the journey up Mount Nebel is fine. It's not the same route as in the flashback, so it doesn't feel too repetitive. By the way, it's funny how there's an actual dragon here as an enemy, the same design as the one Sephiroth destroys in the original, but it's replaced by 2 of these. Yeah, I said this earlier, but they should have stuck with this dragon that Sephiroth murks. I'm not really impressed by Sephiroth smoking 2 of these things instead. Upon reaching the reactor, there's a bunch of dead Wutai ninjas strewn outside of it. Yep, so this is why Yuffie is conveniently here. We will find out what happened here soon, but for now, Yuffie is despairing over the dead, but mostly about her not being informed that her mission is basically irrelevant now. I'll speak on this whole Wutai angle at the end of the chapter, as we get more info on it then. Inside is a boss from the Intermission DLC from Remake. Love the design, by the way. The party discover a few more bodies, one being the guy that we've been looking for his keycard. He's conveniently lying in the same spot where Tifa's dad died, making Tifa have a panic attack, which Cloud relieves. Inside the main room, Cloud gets a vision of him attacking Sephiroth. It's worth noting that this vision is the same scene as in Crisis Core when Cloud attacks Sephiroth, so it seems like they're going to go with this direction rather than the original scene. I mean, it's not like there's much difference, but yeah. Also, Tifa comforts Cloud this time round when he starts to panic. Their relationship has definitely got stronger since Gongaga. Cloud does something on his end to open up the gates to Shinra Manor, and that's the last of this section going up the mountain. In the original, you actually went up the mountain after going to Shinra Manor. The whole purpose of going up or through the mountain in the original was simply just to get past them or over them, because there was no other route the buggy could get to. And of course this led you to Rocket Town, which doesn't exist in this game. So yeah, I guess they made the journey up to Mount Nebel have more purpose this time round. The story here is interesting, with Cloud getting his memories wrong about Zack, and his and Tifa's relationship growing, and also the addition of Wutai continuing to be more involved in the remake series. So all of this was fine, but I'd be lying if I said the gameplay of this section isn't anything other than okay. Back in Nibelheim, Kate Sith, Barrett and Aerith, yep, another very odd group, decide to go to Shinra Manor while Red stays behind to wait for Cloud, Tifa and Yuffie. So every character has led the party at this point apart from Kate Sith, and now it's his time to shine, or shit the bed. Because from what I've seen, the consensus on this is that this is the stinkiest part of the game. The party go to Shinra Manor, and in the basement, they are greeted by an AI hologram version of Hojo, who drops them through a trapdoor that leaves them in a prison cell, presumably where he kept prisoners for his experiments in this facility. Through this next gameplay section where you control Kate Sith, Barrett and Aerith might as well not be here. you'll be rolling through vents, throwing boxes in specific spots to progress, and 1v1 a few types of, honestly, quite difficult enemies. So I understand why people can't stand this part, but I wouldn't say I dislike it as much as 99% of everyone else does. The whole box throwing can be jarring and tedious, as well as the fights with these pricks. I might sound crazy, but the fight with Yin and Yang, I enjoyed a lot. I recall him being tough in the original as well. I probably died here more than any other time in the game, in normal dynamic mode anyway. Part of this is because Cait Sith gameplay wise is quite confusing to use. My main complaint of this section is that I just don't think it was necessary. It just feels like clear padding. Yes, every section gets expanded upon from the original, but I never really got the feeling it was going on for too long. 2 times maybe, but not that much. For example, Junon, Costa del Sol and Cosmo Canyon, but I definitely feel it in this chapter. The reason the return to Nibelheim works for me in the original, because it was short and sweet. Here it's just too much, and as we will see soon, too over the top. Saying this section does end with a lost number fight. One of the enemies I was looking forward to seeing most in Rebirth. I enjoyed this fight despite it having a way more generic arena. Would have been nice to fight it in the main hall in Shino Manor, but the manor in Rebirth isn't exactly very spacious. They absolutely nailed the look of the monster though. The party managed to make their way up to where they got dumped and are reunited with the rest of the group. You get a notification about how Cait Sith is going to be forced upon you in your party for the upcoming section, acting like I didn't just go through the torture of controlling him for like an hour. Also telling you to pick your other party member wisely. We had never had a notification like this yet, so I expected something big was coming. We can't enter the main lab where the terminal that Cait Sith needs is, so we go to the room next door where an out of place coffin is placed. After playing the remake and just before I played the original, I saw a lot of fans saying how Vincent was one of their favourite characters and how they couldn't wait to see him. My thoughts on Vincent in the original is I initially thought his design was very cool despite his weird pointy shoes, and that he clearly had a shrouded interesting history. I didn't get much on his backstory in my first playthrough in the original, but subsequent playthroughs and reading more on it, I think his origin and story overall is very compelling. I know he has his own game, Dirge of Cerberus. I haven't seen everything in that game because it looks like complete dog shit. I saw enough to get more of a grasp on his story. I did have him a lot in my party throughout, just due to his design and, maybe a bit random, but his basic attack animations. Plus, while sometimes hindering, his limit breaks are unique to any others. I really like 2 of these limit break forms, but the other 2, one of them is literally just a rip-off of Frankenstein's monster, and the other one is just if Jason Voorhees and Leatherface had a child, somehow. This one especially feels so out of place. Anyway, moving on. Vincent in Rebirth is not in many scenes, but he's always a presence when he appears on screen. He's still an edgelord, but also retains a lot of his unintentional humour he received in Advent Children. To be honest, he does have a bit of that in the OG as well. Plus his design is perfect, and also his new voice. I think it fits better than his previous voice, honestly. When he first dramatically flies out of his coffin, he says that he's security for this place, and it also shows that he's the final obstacle for getting into Hojo's lab in the mansion. I don't really get this. Why would he be protecting Hojo's lab? He hates him. Is he lying? Is he trying to protect people from going in? Is his story changed slightly? Am I looking too far into it? I don't know, let me know. So yes, we get access to Hojo's lab by using the keycard we got from Murasaki, the dead guy, on Vincent's device, which he doesn't know how to use. Before going there, however, they are stopped by Vincent, catching on that none of the group are a middle-aged Asian man. Cait Sith tries to explain, saying that he can't let their foe win the information war, in which Vincent asks who their foe is. Cloud can respond with 3 different options, but regardless on what one you pick, he always ends up saying their foe is Sephiroth, which bothers Vincent. He allows the group to go into Hojo's lab, but not a certain part of it, only allowing them to touch the terminal. While in there, Cloud decides to go into that exact forbidden room, where he starts to bug out hearing Hojo's voice while looking at these containers or whatever they are. This is of course Hojo experimenting on Cloud after he took him in after Sephiroth shanked him. Vincent gets triggered that the party ignored him. He grabs Cat's shit and takes him into the conveniently massive room outside the lab. Cloud and Vincent have an edge off. Not that type of edge, you degenerate loser. Vincent dashes Kate back and Bloodborne music starts to play. Vincent transforms into his level 1 limit break, the Galleon Beast. I absolutely did not expect a Vincent boss fight, but my god, I'll take it. I know I said I liked Nibelheim in the original for being short and sweet, and for being pretty simple and straightforward. And while this is over the top on paper, I can excuse this because this boss is perfect. His design, animations, and effects are sublime. And his song is a Bloodborne style bombastic remix of his theme. The only feature that might have made it a bit better is fighting his normal form before he turns into his limit break in a move of desperation. But then this would mean that Square would have to animate his moves in his human form, which would get questions from the fans on why he isn't playable in this game. After defeating Vincent, Kate Sith offers Vincent to join the group, but Vincent is still sleepy and decides to go back to bed. So for me, this chapter has gone on longer than it needed to, but we aren't done yet. After Kate Sith explains that he has the location of the Temple of the Ancients, but needs a keystone from the Golden Saucer to actually enter the temple. You'd think that this would be the end of this already drawn out chapter. Kate Sith has a location, and the Vincent boss fight would have been a climactic, epic finale. But nah, Roche has to ruin it, just like he ruined the end of chapter 4. He dives down from a randomly passing Velnica on his bike, willingly destroying it as he lands. Cloud can see Sephiroth in Roche in flashes, obviously because Roche has had a bunch of Genova cells pumped into him. His hair has a patch of silver now. Also, he is feeling some clear negative side effects from the procedure from Hojo. He's out of breath and can barely stand. He says he's here on his own accord. This hunger he speaks of must be his fruity feelings for Cloud. And it's logical to assume the reason why he got the procedure in the first place was to gain enough strength to finally beat Cloud the next time they meet, as he has lost to him multiple times now. How many times do I have to teach you this lesson, old man? Before you take control of the fight, Roche appears as Sephiroth again, telling Cloud to bring him the black materia. This happened as well at the very start of the chapter, but I forgot to mention it. But yeah, obviously this confirms that Sephiroth wants the black materia, as if that wasn't clear enough already. Cloud fucks him up yet again, even with the new cheats Roche has. Roche's final words are, then becomes a black-robed man, succumbing to the degradation. I know we are just supposed to accept him magically getting a black robe, but it is a bit silly. Are the actual black robes, the robes themselves, Genova-fied, shape-shifting, I don't know, goo? I don't know. Look, I get what this scene is trying to accomplish. It's meant to show, well, this, and Roche is used to get this across. And Roche being used for this is understandable, as even the most charismatic, lively character in the game can't stop becoming a shell of a man. And obviously this is relevant for Cloud's character. But I'm sorry, this is not the right place to have this scene. It's just a really odd place for it to take place in. As I've said a few times before, sometimes in Rebirth and Remake, scenes and segments are more dramatic and overboard when compared to their original counterpart. Sometimes, if not most of the time, it works out. Here, it does not. Nibelheim did not have to be this action-packed and dramatic. It's a completely wrong decision to have it be so. But the tone in this game is so drastically different to the original in Nibelheim anyway, for the worst. Nibelheim was somber, eerie and mysterious, not this. This is the first time I sound like a purist. I mean, I'm not overall, but fuck it. In this case, I am. You know where this scene would have worked? In chapter 13, at the start of the Temple of the Ancients, at this exact spot. Don't you think it would have fit better here? Where Shinra are out in full force, when Cloud's mind is starting to be fully taken over by Sephiroth. The whole scene could play out exactly the same, with him just walking into the temple when becoming a black robe. Anyway, enough crying. I might be the only one with this problem. Elsewhere, a broadcast is coming out from Glenn and Wutai, It turns out that firing the Junon cannon was a mistake from Rufus, as Wutai viewed it as an act of aggression, and would look into reports of living weapons being grown in macro-reactors, and that the Wutaian inspectors were gunned down when, well, trying to inspect. Yeah, I mean, what the fuck did you expect? You thought you were just gonna get free reign? Yeah, this explains the bodies outside of the Nebel reactor, by the way, if you couldn't comprehend that already. Then Cloud's potential father starts trying to rally everyone to go to war on Shinra, introducing his commander, Viceroy Saruf. Saruf never shows up, and the camera just stays on the shot for like 20 years. All the Shinra executives are watching. Scarlet finally asks where the fuck Saruf is, which Rufus responds with a sigh. I might as well just say it now. It's like 99% certain that Rufus is Saruf. I did hear in the lore that Rufus did work with Wutai and help create Avalanche in the hope of overthrowing his father to become the new president of Shinra. But I'll be honest, I never pieced this together that Rufus was meant to be Saruf until I looked up theories after I beat the game. Rufus isn't with Wutai now or anything like that. I just think Glenn is mocking him. Speaking of Glenn, Seng reveals to us that he is a soldier who defected after a certain mission. We kind of knew this through Yuffie, but yeah. The next morning, the group are contemplating on how to get back to the saucer, as if they didn't just get around by plane the last couple days. When Kate Sith is asked, he doesn't respond as he's gone offline. I have heard many theories on how Cat shit operates and exists. I always thought he was controlled by Reeve, but when Reeve wasn't in a position to be able to control him, he's still sentient and can act on his own, but obviously still aligned with Shinra. I don't know, is there an actual explanation out there? Someone tell me. Just quickly before we get to the final scene, the Nebel region is a short and sweet region, a welcome smaller but enjoyable area. The traversal is very simple and fun. It was needed after the Cosmo Canyon region. I was getting a bit burnt out on exploring all the different regions. The group reaches the airstrip where Sid is already waiting for them. He starts inquiring about Aerith's mother, as he noticed Aerith is pretty much identical to her now. And for some reason he knows her mother. He shows sadness at the news of her death and expresses his desire to do right by Aerith. Alright, I really don't know why this had to be added to Sid's backstory. It's not like anything comes from it in this game. There's not any payoff. And I don't even see how this could have any payoff or relevance in part 3. Sid is a completely different character, man. I don't like it. Everyone gets on a plane, including Vincent, who decided to stop being a lazy cunt and joins the party, which completes the group. Everyone is now here. Previously, Sid said that the tiny Bronco can only hold a certain amount of people. I don't remember how much. I don't even know if he does say how much it can hold, but he mentions with a new extra person on board, he's really risking it. This ends up with the plane malfunctioning, breaking apart, landing in the ocean. This is a very anticlimactic version of the Bronco getting disabled compared to the original, where the plane got shot down during an escape. Obviously Rocket Town is not in this game, so another scenario of the Bronco becoming a boat had to occur, but they couldn't think of anything really interesting. I don't think I need to give a long ending summary of this chapter. If you've been paying attention during this breakdown for chapter 11, you would deduce that I have quite a few problems with it. Probably more than any other, even the final chapter. I said that these past 2 chapters have been the first drop off in the game, and while I was left with a bit of a bitter taste in my mouth in chapter 10 with the change of Red's voice, the actual chapter itself, the content in it was good. Here in chapter 11 though, it's just a bit all over the place. So while the last 2 chapters were a bit of a downer for me, fortunately the next 2 chapters are some of the high points in this game. After Sid takes his time with trying to sort out the severely damaged tiny Bronco, it is now of course a makeshift boat. They sail to the nearest dock in Costa del Sol, and one thing I just want to quickly mention is the whole story is meant to take place over the whole planet, but you can get to Cosmo Canyon, for example, to Costa del Sol in like a minute and a half. Obviously I know the world has to be condensed, but still, you just have to pretend that the party are travelling further distances than shown in the game. Anyway, as I said, the team dock at Costa del Sol. The group have a bit of banter at the expense of Cloud. and Sid asks to tag along to the gold saucer. Reaching the saucer for the second time, everyone splits up to find Dio to ask about the location of the keystone. While wandering around, you see a bunch of advertisements promoting a showdown between Dio and Don Corneo for the ownership of the gold saucer. We find a badly injured Dio randomly standing and doing nothing in the Battle Coliseum. Turns out that he got bodied by Rude earlier. Yeah, steroids don't give you the ability to fight, pal. After inquiring about the keystone, Dio tells Cloud and Aerith that they can't have it if they win that upcoming battle or tournament against Don Corneo. So Cloud goes back to the hotel to rest, while Aerith writes a song for some reason. We get another scene with Zack in his world, where Marlene begs Zack to make Cloud get better, as if he does not recover, Aerith will be killed by someone, as Cloud will not be able to save her. Zack thinks she had a bad dream or something, which is fair, but no, it turns out that Marlene knows about this due to Aerith magically passing on this information to Marlene in Remake. Now, why would Aerith show a vision of her getting impaled to a 4-year-old girl? I think she's 4 years old, I don't know. I don't know. Yet the phrase "I don't know" has been said a lot by me during these Zack segments, but what do you want from me, for fuck's sake? These scenes are supposed to be ambiguous. Right, let me try some bullshit theory. Maybe Aerith told Marlene so Marlene could pass the information on at this specific moment, so it has put Zack on the right path to where Aerith wants him to be later on. I don't fucking know, right? That's the best I've got. Zack decides to get help from Hojo about Cloud's condition in order to save Cloud and Aerith. Before he gets on his bike, he sees a message left to him from Biggs. He says that he's gonna bomb a reactor due to Zack's motivational speech to him earlier. Zack, I think you have more pressing concerns than Biggs of all people. Alright, let's just get into the part that everyone cares about most in this chapter, the gold saucer date. If you knew nothing about FF7, and you only heard things about FF7 from the fans, you'd think that FF7 is a dating simulator. It's probably the vocal minority, but my god, a lot of fans are a bunch of fucking weirdos who fight all day long about who Cloud should romantically be involved with. The arguments and fights of these shippers are absolutely bizarre. People genuinely dedicate their lives to fighting about a fictional character's relationship in a video game. For me, shipping in itself is really odd, real life or fiction. Anyway, the date I thought I was gonna get and also wanted was Aerith. Not because I ship Aerith and Cloud, but because I wanted it and I just like Aerith as a character. Not because I want Cloud to fucking sleep with her. And also because in my 3 different playthroughs of the original, it was always her. Even on my last playthrough where I actively tried to not get her on the date. I guess I'm on Cloud and Tifa shippers hit list now. Shiver me timbers. However, I didn't get Aerith for my date. Instead, I got Red. Look, I know I berated his whole new voice for a whole chapter, but at this point, I wasn't as annoyed by his new voice as I was before. I'm not going to say I got used to it, and I'm never going to say I like it, but it was what it was. I still do like Red, so I was actually happy to get him. Also, he was never a date option in the original, so it felt like I got something truly unique. So whoever you get on your date will invite you to see Loveless at the theatre. Everyone is there, but obviously you sit with your date. Unless you get Aerith, she fucks off right at the start. The show starts off with a VR play starring Jessie. This play has a bit of symbolism relating to the actual main plot. Next is a play of Loveless itself. This stars most of the party through the VR headset. Cloud obviously plays as the knight, whatever his name is, Alfred. If you got Yuffie or Tifa on your date, then they play the role of Rosa. If you got Aerith on your date, or you didn't get Yuffie or Tifa, the default casting of Rosa is Aerith. The play is pretty good, very cinematic, and it's got a lot of good fight choreography, which you can't really appreciate as you have to concentrate on pressing buttons during the fights. Like the previous play with Jessie, there's a bit of symbolic dialogue in the play related to the main plot. Unfortunately, you can't fuck up the play as you can in the original. I always did that. The final show is Aerith performing her song she was writing before. This song is the actual official theme song of this game, much like Hollow from Remake. I don't listen to this type of music in my own life. I mean, I barely listen to any music anyway, in general. But yeah, I actually like this song and what it represents from Aerith. It feels like an obvious farewell to everyone, since we are closing in on the end. I've seen a bunch of fans fighting who the song is over and the lyrics are about, Cloud, Zack, or just everyone she loves in general. My opinion is, I don't care. I will not get involved in a shipping war. At the end of her performance, Biggs, Jesse and Wedge show up through the live stream. I've seen a lot of people get emotional over this moment in particular. It just shows how well Square Enix did with them in Remake. So overall, I liked all these players and performances, mainly Aerith's final song. The Loveless play on replaythroughs didn't do much for me, to be honest. Alright, so it's now time for the famous Skyroll dates. I'm going to briefly go through all them all and give my thoughts on them. So the first one I saw was obviously Red's, and I genuinely think I got the best one. It's the most lore-heavy date scene, with Red at last letting it be known to Cloud that he and Aerith could see the future in Remake. But now they can't, since the Whispers took their memories away from them. Their memories of the future anyway. I mean, we as a player surely gathered this already, but it's about time that him or Aerith actually told him about being able to see the future directly. Red does let it be known though that he remembers that Aerith is an upcoming danger, but not all the particulars. Cloud makes a promise with Red that he will keep her safe, a promise that will of course not be kept. Yeah, I like this date because it's a bit more focused and relevant to the actual plot, rather than it just be focused on the individual relationship. Yeah, there's still enough of that present here, but not as much as the others. Moving on. Aerith's date starts off as Cloud being an awkward retard as usual. Then Aerith has a similar speech as the original, how Cloud is like Zack, and how she doesn't care and wants to be with him, and that she's trying to find the real him. This date ends with them holding hands. My overwhelming feeling when seeing this scene was feeling very sorry for Zack, to be honest. That guy did not deserve what happened to him. It's even sadder when you remember all the scenes from his parallel world or whatever it is, and see how much he cares for Aerith, but nah, she wants his best friend now. Poor guy. Tifa's date is personally not very interesting for me. They have quite a few better scenes than this one in Rebirth. Of course, it's probably the favourite date among the fans because of this kiss at the end, or the hug if they don't like each other that much. The most significant part of Tifa and Aerith's dates is this.
I talked to Cloud. He said he remembers Zack. How they were friends 5 years ago.
What?
I don't think so. At least, not about anything important.
Not yet.
As you can see, they both pretty much lie to Cloud, as Tifa and Aerith are now both in on Cloud having memory issues about Zack, and presumably trying to get him to figure it out himself. Very quickly, can I just say, it's absolutely obvious to anyone who doesn't have a bias for one of Tifa or Aerith, or a ship preference. God, I feel cringe even saying the word ship or shipping. It's clear that in the original and in the remakes, that Cloud likes both of them, and Tifa and Aerith like him. I'm not insinuating some degenerate polygamy angle, I'm just saying he's got the mind of essentially a 16-year-old and is constantly around these two beautiful women. He likes both. It's clear to any non-brain rotted shipper on either side, and that's why you as a player can decide on whose affinity you want to raise. It is your choice on who Cloud dates. Oh, do you know what, bro? I'm not speaking about this shit. I feel cringe even speaking about it. The shippers are just weird. Barrett's date is probably the weakest, but not bad. He gives a bit of backstory on him and his dead wife, and amusingly tries to pry Cloud on who he's romantically interested in. Thankfully, Yuffie's date is not made weird. I was nervous that even just me watching this date would put me on a register. It's honestly one of the better Skyroll scenes as well. They both talk about how they are inept romantically. You are 16, but okay. And Yuffie makes a callback to Crisis Core about how she got fooled by Zack in the past in Wutai. Not directly saying it was him, but obviously implying it, and saying she had a crush on him. Yuffie pecks Cloud on the cheek, saying it was just practice, in which Cloud responds with nothing. Ending on a humorous note with Yuffie getting annoyed about Cloud being mute the whole time, and doing the same fake punches to Cloud as she did back then with Zack, which prompts Cloud to actually play along just like his dead friend did. Yeah, funny date with a nice callback, and thankfully, nothing that makes Cloud a nonce. The final date consists of Cloud, Sid, Kate Sith and Vincent. This is your punishment or reward if you manage to gain no affinity with anyone. This is the most comedic Skyroll scene, with Cloud, Sid and Vincent being miserable throughout. This is probably the only glimpse we get to see of the real Sid we all know and not this imposter. While Kate Sith tries to entertain and lighten up the mood, he fails and gets pissed off at everyone, and Vincent just takes a nap. This is obviously meant to be the worst date, but I unironically like it better than a couple of the other dates. It made me laugh quite a bit when I first saw it. In conclusion, I did enjoy all these dates, some more than others. You know what? Here's a small ranking to annoy some people. Yeah, cry about it, but seriously, they clearly put a lot of work into these scenes. After whatever Skyrill scene you get, the next scene is the Turks and Rufus making their way over to the Gold Saucer as they know about the upcoming event and that the Keystone will be awarded to the winner. So in the original, you also do battle in the battle arena for the Keystone, however it's very simple and anticlimactic. Theo gives it to you even if you put in a subpar performance. Here in Rebirth, it's a lot more fleshed out and memorable, fighting with your date and a party member of your choosing, against waves of thugs, cactuars and tomberries who disturbingly have Corneo's hair. Finally a boss fight with Corneo and his pet Abzu. Corneo didn't show up until Wutai after Midgar in the original, and of course Wutai doesn't appear in this game, so this is a place that makes sense for him to show up in. After humiliating Corneo, Theo presents the Keystone to the party, but it's not over yet. Eleanor snatches the stone and plays catch with Rude for a bit. After these two stop goofing about, the Turks are supposed to be super agents, by the way. The expected betrayal from cat shit happens. Rude throws the stone over to him and he runs off at the confusion of the group. Barrett, Red and Yuffie go after him, leaving Cloud, Tifa and Aerith to have a rematch with the two Turks. But first, an interval where both sides can rest and recover. It always makes me laugh how these random vending machines show up everywhere, even in ancient caves and temples. Anyway, it's another fun Turk fight. The fights with the Turks in these games are always great. And the next fight is definitely a contentious one. Rufus makes his entrance like a WWE superstar, here to 1v1 Cloud yet again, just like he did in Remake. My thoughts on this fight in Remake were, it was easily one of my favourite fights in Remake. It was tactical, cinematic, had sharp choreography and a banger rendition of the Shinra theme. It was a striking first impression for Rufus for me. Don't get me wrong though, I can see why people aren't a fan of that fight. It can be quite frustrating to learn. As for the rematch in Rebirth, it's everything I said before but better. A larger moveset, another banger track. His dog Darkstar enters the fight in the second phase rather than the first. But yeah, for me, maybe an unpopular opinion, one of the best fights in the game, easily, top 5 at least. And that rounds off this longer battle arena gauntlet. Some might say it drags on a bit, but I enjoyed it a lot, far superior to its original counterpart. Rufus runs off after being salty in defeat. Cloud joins in the search for that rat cat shit. After running around the main area of the Golden Saucer to try find where he's hiding for like 5 minutes. Yeah, I probably took a bit too long to find him, it really wasn't that hard. We finally catch up to him, but it's too late and he hands the Keystone over to Seng. Kate Sith's betrayal is a bit darker in the original, as when he was confronted about the betrayal, he warns the others not to try anything against him, as Marlene and Elmira are being essentially kept hostage. This is gone in Rebirth. Kate Sith shows more remorse and tries to make everyone feel sorry for him. He also temporarily completely leaves the party for a while, unlike the original where he continued to worm his way into the group. I'm not saying I was sad at this betrayal or anything, I mean I knew it was coming, but objectively it is a better betrayal since Kate Sith is way more likable than he was in 1997. But yeah, still not the saddest thing in the world. So yeah, he gets exiled from the party, and the party are stumped on what to do next, as only Kate Sith knows the location of the Temple of the Ancients. I mean, he's right over there. You can still interrogate him or even beat it out of him. No? Okay. No, instead Vincent finally contributes something, letting it be known that he knows what radio frequencies Shinra use, and that they can track them to the temple. Chapter 12 expands and upgrades everything compared to its original portrayal, from the loveless play to the massive amount of time and effort spent on the dates, which developed the relationships between the characters even more. And finally, the much more fittingly dramatic arena battles for the rights to the Keystone. This is a really little thing, but there was one scene missing from the original not exactly significant in the grand scheme of things, but it's the one where all the party are on screen discussing things in the haunted hotel, just talking about their goal in general, and even worrying if the number tattoo on red is the same as the black-robed men. I like this scene because there's not a lot of times where everyone is together in the original. However, everyone in Rebirth is pretty much always together, so it's not like this scene was a notable exclusion. Anyway, definitely one of the best chapters in the game, and certainly the most replayable. So here we are, the penultimate chapter, although this chapter is so fat that it's probably the size of 2 or 3 chapters. I've seen some say that this chapter is a bit too bloated and dragged out, but for me, I massively welcome the juicing up of the Temple of the Ancients. This chapter starts with Vincent listening into the Turks' conversation to gather the location of the Temple of the Ancients. Rather than it just being Seng and Elena to go to the temple, Rufus actually mobilizes the entire force to storm the temple, which I believe is one of the best changes to this whole Temple of the Ancients segment. Sure, it was probably done to enhance the action and spectacle of this chapter, however, it absolutely is fitting and makes perfect sense that Shinra would throw everyone at this death trap, which is known for people never returning from it once entering. Plus, Rufus believes there's a strong chance that the temple may be the Promised Land, Shinra's ultimate goal. Also, Reno is finally back. So the party follow Rufus over the ocean, and we get a scene of Hojo straight up telling Rufus that the temple is not the Promised Land. Well, if Rufus actually just listened to him here at this moment, he could have aborted the mission and saved like 90% of his military being wiped out. The Turks placed the keystone in the pedestal, resulting in the temple building itself. Yeah, it may be a bit dramatic, but it does look cool, and it does present the temple as being a genuine myth or legend, rather than it just being a decrepit structure in the jungle. Reaching the coast of Northwood, the continent that the temple resides in, you are given the message that this is the point of no return, so make sure you have completed all 7 million side activities before setting foot here. Once on the continent, Aerith hugs the floor as she can sense the live stream or some shit. A teardrop from her activates a life force burst, which prompts Barrett to recite a line of one of the ancient scriptures, thinking this is the Promised Land. Aerith makes him look like a fool by saying, nah, and they head towards the entrance. You destroy a horde of troopers and soldiers at the entrance and head to the doors. Wait 1 second, tell me this wouldn't have been a better location to have the second Roche fight, rather than it being oddly placed at the end of Nibelheim. Shinra is out in full force, a fun boss fight to start the chapter. You could still have the same conclusion as him turning into a black robe and now entering the temple. If you disagree, you are wrong. Reaching the main doors, there's a bunch of strewn Shinra and monster corpses who have slaughtered each other. This is why I like that Shinra are here this time round. It's like a 3-way war between Shinra, the guardian monsters of the temple, and Avalanche. It makes Shinra feel more present in the main plot, as they should be. Sid and Vincent decide to stay behind because they aren't playable yet. You know, I understand the decision not to make these two playable, as they want to save them for the final game. But I feel like Sid especially is present in the game enough to be playable, but I get it. Also, before entering the temple, Aerith tries to get permission from the livestream ancient spirits to have safe passage through the temple, but the spirits are like, nah, you're a half-human Mongol, you don't get a free pass. The first thing you see when entering is Roche stumbling and mumbling around. Sorry, but I don't feel sorry for this guy. You are misused in this game. I love the style and design of the temple. The original temple was obviously supposed to be somewhat complex and confusing, a labyrinth basically. The first section of this level consists of fighting through Shinra and monsters while trying to navigate your way through the bizarre layout and structure of the temple. The law of physics and time don't really exist here. You will find various platforms like these that will switch the direction and location of where you want to go, leading to a few optional paths which can have a few rewards, such as the final obtainable weapons for each party members, and also some material. I'm not going to pretend like it was the most confusing level design in the world, but 1 or 2 times it did make me stumped very briefly, which is what they were going for, so good job I guess. I think they nailed the aesthetic and atmosphere here, and for the whole temple in general, not just this first part of the level. It's very ominous. The first of many bosses is the Red Guardian Dragon. On normal and dynamic difficulty, this boss is fine, but one of its moves is completely bugged or something in hard mode, or it's just purposely unfair, leading to you getting pretty much one shot every time it does that special move. Once Tifa kills this giant ancient dragon with her foot, the group push on, seeing the livestream wipe out a bunch of Shinra genericos. Aerith starts dancing and spinning around to try and calm the livestream. She fails miserably. Turns out dancing doesn't calm down the angry spirits, protecting a materia capable of destroying the world, and a platform lifts her, Red and Yuffie, up somewhere, while Cloud, Tifa and Barrett, the original group, are back together. Tifa expresses concern at the 3 disappeared members, but Cloud coldly moves on. The next section with these 3 plays a rendition of one of my favourite tracks from the original, Listen to the Cries of the Planet. I was wondering why this was playing here and not the Forgotten Capital, but as we will see later, the Forgotten Capital is barely even a location in this game, so the track is used here, I guess. The 3 come across 3 soldiers, who they defeat easily. However, if you have been paying attention to Cloud's demeanour since entering the temple, you should have figured out that he's not exactly himself. As the last defeated soldier begs for his life, Cloud mutters,
"It's not death. It's a homecoming,"
and brutally dispatches him, like the troopers in Chapter 9. I've said a bunch that the possession or mind control of Cloud is more prominent and more in-depth, and this is just the start of it really coming into fruition. Reno and Rude turn up, teasing a rematch from the fight on the top of the Sector 7 plate, but they blow up the walls around them and dip out. The Turks have finally learnt their lesson about going up against Avalanche, as they have been constantly beat up by them in these past 2 games. We get this weird transition when switching back to the other party. I don't think this is important or anything, I just think it's to show how the temple's sense of time is different. But yeah, we switch back to probably the most random party in the game. Yuffie and Red reassure Aerith after she botched controlling the livestream, and they press on. The next gameplay section with these 3 consists of the party killing the fiends of the temple and Aerith absorbing their soul energy to fix up her limited power over the livestream. Yeah, okay, Shang Tsung. Sure, I like the concept, however, the actual duration of absorbing each individual soul could be a bit quicker. Very tiny nitpick, I'm not that impatient. Once Aerith gets enough soul life force, you can put that force into rebuilding large sections of the broken up, contorted temple to actually progress through it. After Aerith gets tired, she takes a break and we switch back over to the original party who are still trapped. Barrett randomly kicks the wall or bricks to magically clear the way. The dead soldiers are transformed into monsters and Cloud continues to be an edgy psycho. As they move on, they need to block up the raging winds of the livestream with these things. There's one of these cube things at the top of this tower that they try to get down, but are interrupted by an iron golem. They decide to use the golem to knock down the pillar that cube thing is on. You can't just defeat the iron golem, you have to stagger it so it actually triggers the cutscene where it bumps into the pillar and knocks it down. This fight is really cool, however, it would have been better if the final side quest of the game didn't spoil me on this enemy. Couldn't have used another enemy here for this side quest? No? Alright. Okay. Anyway, the party get across the raging livestream and see the Turks beefing with frogs and other types of fiends. They decide to form a temporary alliance after clotheslining a few fiends, and Rude gets over the fact that he has to beat up his crush. The rematch of the Sector 7 plate begins. Just before I talk about this fight, I love the choreography and cinematography of the fight before you take control. Rebirth has a lot of great choreography in general, but this one always stood out to me. So yes, as with all the Turks fight, this one is also great. This is why I like that Shinra are at the Temple of the Ancients now. Sometimes in the original, it feels like Shinra are put on the back burner when maybe they should be more involved. And here, for example, Reno and Rude rematching the classic party in one of the final boss fights in the game, with all the spectacle, makes the Turks and also Shinra feel more relevant in the overall plot. The fight ends with everyone falling through the floor, where the rest of the party are below. We don't continue from here just yet though. We go back in time to where we left off with Aerith, Red and Yuffie. This segment is essentially the same as the previous one with these three. Once Aerith has gained enough power to fully reconstruct the temple, these three encounter Seng and Elena. A somewhat random hope I had for this game is that we would fight Seng for the first time ever, and thankfully my wish was granted. This fight isn't as good as the other Turk fight we just had, but it's still very solid. Seng's moveset is cool, although in an extremely rare occurrence, I'm not a big fan of this Jazz Turks theme in this fight. It's not bad, but it's the weakest Turk theme in my opinion, which I don't think a lot of people agree with. The other half of the party come crashing down from their Turk fight, and now we're up to date with everything. Cloud, continuing to be a psycho, tries to give Elena the Anne Boleyn treatment, while repeating this phrase yet again. Tifa stops Cloud and Barrett convinces Cloud to move on, and they all press forward after Seng, who didn't stick around after being defeated. After everyone leaves, the former Turk Vincent addresses the current Turks. Little cool moment here. Seng deduces that the temple is not actually a temple, but a fortress. Sephiroth attacks Seng with a seemingly fatal blow as the party enter the room. Aerith cries out for her long-term stalker as Sephiroth says,
Don't be afraid. It's not death. It's a homecoming.
Sound familiar? An injured Seng shoots Sephiroth in the back, killing him, becoming the true hero of Final Fantasy VII. Yeah, no, it's just another black robe. Aerith runs over to Seng and comforts her dying handler. Aerith, I know he's been kind of the only constant in your life, but you definitely have Stockholm Syndrome to a degree. Anyway, Seng just fucking walks off a stab wound like it's nothing and pisses off. Yeah, I know he survives in the original as well, but honestly, I don't know why he couldn't have just been killed off here. It's not like he did anything after this in the original. Now that I think about it, I don't think any villain in the original was ever killed off, apart from Scarlet and Heidegger, and even that's not confirmed. Anyway, Aerith activates a pedestal, and 5 out of the 6 party members must undertake a trial to proceed. These aren't combat trials though, these are mental trials, where every party member must relive their most traumatic moments and overcome them. Cloud is left out as even the livestream or whoever dictates who should take the trial knows Cloud is too fucked up to take it. Okay, so let's briefly go through each character's trial. We start off with Red 13, who relives his capture of Shinra and Hojo. We see how his eye got busted, and also how he was named Red 13 and got his branding, as if that wasn't clear enough on how he got that name. So I've obviously berated Red's new voice for the entire video. However, I think the new voice and his new demeanor change in general make the scene sadder. Knowing that this is a puppy, okay, not quite a puppy, but a kid being tortured like this, perhaps makes it a bit more hard-hitting. Let's hope that when we return to Midgar in the final part, that the 3-man party to fight and kill Hojo consists of Red, Cloud and Vincent. Tifa's trial is pretty straightforward, with her reliving the destruction of Nibelheim and the death of her dad. Not much to say about this. Yuffie has memories of Sonon and this BDSM merchant, Nero, who mocks Sonon's death, also saying this line. This line is kind of interesting, as it might be implying that Sonon isn't truly fully dead. I mean, we saw him being dragged off by Nero in the DLC. I'm gonna assume that Sonon is corrupted, and we'll see this version of him in part 3, and Yuffie will kill Nero, freeing Sonon, but not resulting in him being alive again, just that he can properly die and return to the livestream. That's my random theory anyway. Next up is Barrett. His trial could involve an abundance of things from his past, take your pick, but instead of retreading old ground through the dead Avalanche members or with Dyne, we see his dead wife for the first time, and eventually of course witness her death. Yeah, it's sad, but honestly I didn't feel that much. Barrett has had so much shit happen to him that at this point I was just like, oh, another traumatizing event from his past? Okay. Still sad, but I think you can understand where I'm coming from. And the saddest trial is left to last, with Aerith and her mother. Aerith tries to find a doctor for her dying mother, but finding no success.
Stay down, brat.
Sorry, but I couldn't help but laugh seeing this. What a prick. This is where we see the only good-hearted person of the slums, Elmira, trying to help Aerith out. But Aerith walks off, slowly crying all the way back to her dying mother. Orphana says a final goodbye, gives her the white materia, and asks Elmira, who thankfully didn't stop following Aerith, to take Aerith somewhere safe before dying. Elmira pulls a distraught Aerith away from her dead mother as Shinra troopers and scientists discover her body, as grown Aerith watches helpless. This is the most fleshed out and emotional trial. The tone, music, acting, and just everything about it gets you in the feels. Everyone comes out from their trial rooms having been diagnosed with depression. Aerith gives a monologue about life and death and how to look forward, not back, trying to cheer everyone up. I'm sure every single party member were completely inspired by her profound speech. And that...
Are you finished?
Someone slapped this chocobo looking ass clown. Yeah, I know it's not his fault, but still. Honestly, I think I laughed when I first saw this. Your speech was kinda mid-Aerith, to be honest, I'm sorry. A door opens for the group to proceed through. Cloud, in fact, does not get let off from having a trial, although this trial isn't directly from the temple itself. It's essentially just Sephiroth fucking about as per usual. Sephiroth poses the question on why Cloud doesn't feel emotions and calls him nothing but his puppet. Cloud shanks Sephiroth, which does nothing, and Sephiroth tells him to give in to hatred, ending in Cloud in a similar stance and shot from where Sephiroth burned down Nibelheim. In reality, Cloud just offed another black robe and says how he will never be like Sephiroth. Yeah, a bit late for that, pal. We continue to go through the temple, including fighting these annoying tortoises. We come across a livestream projection of the Cetra showing us their history, how the humans fought them, and more importantly, how they eventually defeated and sealed away Genova, also explaining their reunion. This was a really cool moment, and probably even more so for new players discovering what Genova truly is. The Cetra also explains that the Gi got murked, and in their saltiness created the black materia, which we already knew. Finally explaining that the black materia summons Meteor. Sephiroth appears and starts yapping about how he's gonna make everything whole forever, his mother and the errant worlds. Aerith steps in, being somewhat consumed by the livestream. I think the ancients are kind of speaking through her here. She tells Sephiroth that he's talking shit. As we will see later, this whole remake story is honestly about Aerith versus Sephiroth, but more on this in the final chapter. The demon wall or gate shows up to be the final obstacle in the way of the black materia. I don't know why, but I was really happy to see this boss show up in particular. Cloud delivers the final blow or blows to the monster. If you were paying attention during the fight, Cloud was giggling to himself throughout. Anyway, he starts frantically smashing the wall to get to the black materia, which troubles the rest of the group. We take back control of Aerith and reach Cloud, who is manically giggling while standing next to the black materia. He picks it up and the temple begins to rumble, as Cloud has this crazy smirk on his face. This is where the snake Kate Sith comes back to save the day. I said before that Kate Sith was a bit of a nothing character for me in the original, definitely my least favourite party member in that game. However, his sacrifice for me for some reason always got me in the feels. I don't exactly know why. I think the music in that scene had something to do with it. Anyway, whatever it was clearly a good scene if it got me emotional over a character I didn't particularly like. Now comparing it with this new one, it's quite different. It's a bit more dramatic and theatrical, as with a lot of scenes in Rebirth compared to their original counterpart, which we've discussed like 50 times. Anyway, here he comes in at the last minute to save the day, as the temple is already coming down, rather than him offering to sacrifice himself once everyone had already left the temple. Oh yeah, that reminds me, a small change I don't like is that the temple itself is no longer the black materia. I mean, it's not a big deal, but the temple simply just coming down once the materia is removed is just a bit more bland and generic. Maybe it makes more sense that the temple is not the black materia, as now the black materia would be buried under a shitload of rubble in this massive pit when the temple comes down. Anyway, I'm a bit all over the place here, let me go back a bit. So yeah, Cloud takes the materia, the temple starts falling apart, Barrett shoves Cloud over in an attempt to return the materia to the altar. Also, Aerith mentions that this materia is a fake, which I was thinking the same as Cloud here, but she's seemingly not lying. Kate Sith comes to hold up whatever this is. The rest of the group escape to the new rendition of the OG temple theme. Once everyone is out, Cat Shit finally gets smashed along with his Moogle. I wonder how emotional this would have been if I had never played the original. Well, it doesn't matter anyway, because he shows up a minute after his death, so yeah. But this time he doesn't return while Aerith is getting the shit beaten out of her. Okay, so now for the very final part of this long ass chapter. Barrett scolds Cloud and tries to take the materia from him. Cloud refuses like an actual child, and Barrett chucks the materia away, which rolls to Sephiroth. From here, it gets a bit odd, and honestly perhaps the only blip of this chapter. Sephiroth starts off by saying that this black materia is the key to gain access to the true black materia hidden between worlds. What the fuck is this multiverse bullshit? What do you mean true counterpart? Why couldn't this just be the real deal? Whatever, I guess this is why Aerith calls it a fake. Whispers and other shit start to spawn, like these branches just grow everywhere. Sephiroth calls over Cloud, drops the black materia, and asks Cloud to bring it to him. Why? No clue. The only thing I can think of is he's basically mocking and messing with Cloud. I don't know, there might be something else going on with this. Tifa tackles Cloud before he can hand over the materia, and Aerith takes it. So this time, unsurprisingly, the scene of Cloud beating the shit out of Aerith was cut. I would have kept it in. Here, Cloud doesn't lay a finger on her, but still acts antagonizingly towards her by chasing her down while continuing to manically laugh some more, also trying to convince Aerith to give it to her. These lines are so well performed. It's like a scene out of a horror movie. Reaching the end of this branch thing, Aerith is forced to hand over the materia. I mean, she could have just dashed it into the pit below. Cloud brings over the materia to Sephiroth like a proud dog, and Aerith starts to get ambushed by Whispers. Cloud finally snaps out of his trance after seeing Aerith struggling. He saves her from falling at the last second, but Sephiroth slices the branch and both freefall into the abyss. Sephiroth, remember when you said,
Nor will I have you end.
Yeah, I mean, you took one hell of a gamble with this move. Did you expect him to survive this? So some things in the scene I like. Cloud's slasher movie villain demeanor for one, but the whole black materia not being the real one kind of bothers me, and I don't have a clue what he's doing here, or telling Cloud to bring him the materia after already having it. I'm not looking forward to talking about the final chapter. Most of it is going to consist of me saying, I don't know what's going on. But all in all, chapter 13 is absolutely my favourite chapter in the game. Yeah, I get why people might say it's a bit too dragged out, especially since a few of the last few chapters were a lot shorter, but I love pretty much everything that the temple entails. All the enemies and bosses that Shinra are heavily involved, the whole look and design of the temple, Cloud's descent into his psycho, the heavy trials of all the characters, the expanded lore of the Cetra and Genova. Also, it's more in line with the darker, more mature tone I prefer. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy the light-hearted tone throughout a lot of this game, but the final two chapters are pretty much completely serious, as it should be. So yeah, the final couple minutes of this chapter barely brings it down. I love it. So here we go, the final chapter. This is going to be a headache to talk about. We start off with Seng and the Turks and Rufus and Hojo heading back to Midgar. Rufus denies letting Hojo turn Seng into a black robe. Not much else to say. This will be the only normal scene we will see in this chapter. We cut to Zack in the expressway with two diverging paths. One will take him to Shinra HQ and the other to Sector 6, where Biggs is planning to blow up the reactor. He struggles to make a decision for some reason. Yeah, I get he wants to help everyone, but we are talking about saving your best friend. Well, maybe apart from Kunsel, or saving some random guy you met for like 15 minutes. Get real, Zack. He thinks about his conversation where Marlene told him that Aerith is gonna die, but it turns out that Zack also asked Marlene if Aerith had feelings for Cloud, in which Marlene responds with saying she does. I think Square Enix hate Zack or something. This guy never wins. This memory prompts Zack to decide to save Cloud, because he's a cuck, I guess. I'm joking. A rainbow effect appears when Zack makes this decision, something we will see again later. Cloud seemingly wakes up in the world that we've been seeing throughout the Zack segments. However, if you notice, the screen quickly blacks out as there's some sort of transition, but he's seemingly in the exact same place. However, as we will see soon, he's in a different world to anything we have seen. Aerith shows up saying that this is her dream, and just to play along with what's going on for now. Before leaving her house, she tells Cloud not to look up when stepping outside. Cloud obviously ignores her and looks up to see the rift in the sky. We'll speak more on this at the end. Aerith and Cloud go on pretty much a date around this strange world. The shopkeepers they visit all have accepted that the world is about to end. Plus, in these shops, it's confirmed that this world is in fact a third one, as there's a third new dog breed plastered around everywhere as a new version of Stamp. We get back to Zack, who is being aimed down by Shinra troopers, identical to when he was murdered in Crisis Core. He drives straight at them, and we cut back to Aerith and Cloud, where Sephiroth can be heard talking to Aerith.
So this is where you've been hiding, in a world that has accepted its fate.
What I take from this is the all-knowing Sephiroth talking to the original version of Aerith. Yeah, this is definitely not the Aerith we know. We'll see her in another dreamlike sequence soon as well. But here, this is either the OG Aerith, or an Aerith from a different world that at least knows the future and past events, just like Aerith did in Remake before she lost her knowledge of all of that. We go to Biggs now, who is chilling at the Sector 6 reactor. He's given up on bombing the reactor because the Mako has all run out anyway. Zack appears to presumably stop Biggs from becoming Osama Biggs Laden, and wait, how is Zack here if he decided to help Cloud? Well, because this is alternate world number 4. Zack tries to lift Biggs' spirits after Biggs cries about being a failure. Biggs gets killed out of nowhere by a singular gunshot. A bit embarrassing how anyone can be killed by that. I said this joke earlier, but fuck it, I'm repeating it. Shinra gunfire is the equivalent of BB guns. Zack is in a compromising, familiar position, but instead of getting lit up, he manages to escape his death. Also before that, when standing down the troopers, he says, I might be wrong, but this seems to indicate that he knows about his original death hit. We momentarily go back to Cloud and Aerith again, and head straight back to Zack in the 5th scene world. Sephiroth rocks up to the church entrance and sends Zack to the fucking void, telling him he's not here for him. Zack fights through this fissure of black whispers and ends up in a bright realm with white whispers and floating yellow flower petals, flowing in a certain direction. This is clearly calling back to
Follow them, the yellow flowers.
So yeah, we can deduce that this is Aerith guiding Zack to wherever. We will see where he ends up soon. This upcoming scene may be the saddest in the game. It's the true final goodbye from Aerith to Cloud. She tells him not to blame himself for what is about to happen. My mind instantly went to Advent Children, where Aerith told Cloud that she never blamed him for her death. Aerith hands Cloud the white materia, saying one last thank you and goodbye, and pushing him into a dimensional portal or some shit, as Sephiroth enters the church, menacingly approaching Aerith. Yeah, this whole chapter has been a fever dream so far, and extremely baffling with all this dumb multiverse shit. But this scene in isolation, I really love. Alright, here we go. Take it away, Sephiroth.
Behold, the true nature of reality.
Alright, I'm not showing your 20-year monologue. Shush. The first thing Sephiroth says is that new worlds are born once fate is breached. When I first heard this, I thought when the party destroyed the Whisper Harbinger, all its fate powers fragmented, and this is what created alternate realities. But I don't know. He then explains that the planet encompasses a bunch of worlds, some endure, some fade away, but all essentially return to the planet. What the fuck am I even saying? Worlds is a strange word to say for this. I think you have to think of it as realities or timelines. I was dreading reaching this final part as I'm supposed to give theories and shit, but I don't know, the whole multiverse stuff seems to be very convoluted and contradictory here. So you know what? I'm gonna let this random NPC from Cosmo Canyon take over, as this might be the actual explanation to the whole multiverse stuff.
So, my parents are no longer with us. Here, that is. But I believe they're still out there, on another plane. I've been reading a bunch of theories about this alternate world in the hope of going there someday. And over the course of my studies, I stumbled across a fascinating theory. It addressed the issue of what the live stream is, arguing that spiritual energy is actually a manifestation of our knowledge and memories. Like I said, it's a fascinating theory, but it's incomplete. What about our hopes and dreams? We remember those, don't we? So what if spiritual energy doesn't distinguish between our real, lived memories and the unrealized desires buried deep in our hearts? What if coming into contact with that energy allowed us to peer through the looking glass, so to speak? It's just an idea, but I hope to find the truth someday.
Well, isn't that splendid?
Alright, so this might not be what's actually going on, but at least I can work with this a bit. So yeah, the worlds being a part of people's conscious or soul in the live stream makes sense, I guess. Making these alternate worlds not on the actual physical real plane like the one we play through, which makes me think, why is the world we play in real since we aren't following the exact same events of the original game? Wouldn't this just make this world another fake dream world? Well, no, because it's clearly not depicted like the other worlds we see in this game, with people's sense of time scuffed, for example. Maybe the world we play in is the original world, but the whole plot of Aerith and Sephiroth duking it out in the livestream is there because the livestream, as well as encompassing multiple realities, encompasses the future also, and time in general. And that's why Aerith from the original keeps sending knowledge back to her past self, as they are linked through the livestream, to eventually fix up everything. But then where do the whispers come in? You know what, I'm done. No more dumb, nonsensical theories. It's supposed to be ambiguous and unclear. I can't be asked. All I'm gonna say is I don't like multiverses, but I have a small hope that the whole different realities will eventually be explained in a satisfying way. It's probably just cope for me, but I don't know, we'll see. I hope we don't see 2 or more of the same character on screen at the same time or something like that. Like multiple Clouds on screen fighting Sephiroth. I despise that trash concept. That's it, moving on. Cloud ends up in the Sleeping Forest for some reason. Sephiroth says that the white materia doesn't belong there. Cloud fights off a few black whispers before the look of the forest changes. Aerith shows up yet again. However, this dream or whatever it is actually in the original as well. This is the remake Aerith we know. And I'll just point out that while I don't know how it works, it seems like any version of Aerith can communicate this way through this dream stuff. It happened in remake as well. And as I just said, the original. Probably just her powers as an ancient, being attuned to the livestream. Let's just explain everything as the livestream from now on. Anyway, Aerith receives the white materia from Cloud and transfers the power of that one to her one, as of course her one lost its power. Sure, I get the whole purpose of the other Aerith giving Cloud the white materia so she can send Cloud back to the main world to give a working white materia back to our Aerith. That's pretty clear. Also, Aerith gives the now clear materia back to Cloud for some reason. Aerith walks off yet again, and Cloud is stopped from following her by the White Whispers. Cloud is finally sent back to reality. He gets a bit of flashes of what happened after him and Aerith fell. Aerith wakes first. The others discover them somehow. They fell into a bottomless pit. How did they even get down there? Aerith speaks to the party, most likely telling them about how they need to get to the city of the ancients. Cloud is still mostly unconscious here. He just briefly wakes from time to time. We skip straight to the Sleeping Forest, completely skipping Bone Village. I'm sure we will see it repurposed for part 3, and Aerith disappears from the party. Cloud finally fully awakes. Everyone tells Cloud of Aerith's plan to come here, but now she's gone missing. The party, after a couple of minutes, reached the Forgotten Capital. Obviously the main part of this section in the original was Aerith's demise, but entering the Forgotten City to that ominous music and just the whole build up to that moment always stuck with me. Unfortunately, here Sephiroth somehow tears apart the whole place and puts you on a course where you pretty much explore none of it. Yeah, we come back to this location a couple more times, but it's a shame that the first time here was basically cut. So yeah, as I said, Sephiroth somehow fucks up the whole landscape. It's worth noting that these shots are identical to Remake's final boss. Also, Sephiroth says,
"It's upon us. The reunion, when worlds merge."
So it seems like reunion has a different meaning in this trilogy. The group press on to reach Aerith, but are stopped by and forced to fight the White Whispers. Aerith is obviously in control of these Whispers, and seemingly wants to prevent anyone from saving her, supporting the old theory that she always planned to die. This big entranceway gets blocked by seemingly Sephiroth Whispers, I can't really tell, which doesn't make much sense to me, as when Cloud says Aerith's name, the Black Whispers get directed by Cloud to break through this barrier. I don't know, maybe they strictly want Cloud to go through. So yeah, he gets through, and now we are at the part everyone has been waiting for. Firstly, the altar or sanctuary looks beautiful, by the way. Okay, so approaching this moment, I was 50-50 on whether Aerith would live or die. I was probably edging towards her dying, but who knows after seeing all this crazy stuff in the past 2 games. Well, it turns out I was wrong, and Cloud manages to block Sephiroth's sword, saving Aerith. Nah, this was just Cloud being deluded or seeing another version of what could happen or what happens, and Sephiroth actually did shank her once again. Cloud cries over Aerith, presumably saying the same lines he said in the original. This is either because he's experiencing 2 different realities, or he's just trying to block out the fact that she's really gone. The others come in to see what's happening. There's flashes of Aerith with blood on her, and some shots with no blood. I've seen people say that this is from the perspective of Tifa, however I never really thought this way. Don't get me wrong, it could be, especially since she is somewhat familiar with the livestream now, and she could be seeing 2 different outcomes or something. However, I personally just think this is Cloud coping, that he saved her. One of the reasons I believe this is, well, because I want to distance the plot as much as possible from the multiverse, but logically there is a bit of evidence, such as this line from Sephiroth.
However, you'll never see the truth with such clouded eyes.
And when entering the Jenova fight, everyone but Cloud has their limit bar full, indicating that they are pissed off over Aerith's death, whereas Cloud's bar is completely empty, as he believes that he saved her and is still alive. But we get more evidence on this later also. But regardless, Aerith's death itself is still emotional despite this. I know confusion seems to drown out the sadness among most players, which is completely understandable. Yeah, while it was still confusing for me also, I never got the feeling that Aerith was going to end up alive again, as in the one we knew. So her being dead is still sad in itself, despite being confusing. We transitioned into the Jenova fight, which thankfully kept in playing Aerith's theme during the fight, the first phase in this fight anyway. This multi-phase fight for me is by far the best fight in the game. The presentation, the spectacle, the party members all splitting off to each have a turn on Jenova. This phase transition, or whatever you want to call it, is amazing. And when Jenova's theme kicks in after drowning out Aerith's theme, it's my favourite version of it so far. So yeah, amazing fight, despite it irritating me a bit in hard mode. From this point on until the very end, on my first playthrough mainly, I felt like I was in a fever dream. So Jenova is defeated and Cloud is teleported somewhere. Zack, who was following the flower petals, ends up with only blinding white around him. He sees Cloud in the white, transporting him to seemingly the edge of creation, of course reuniting with Cloud. I always expected this convergence to occur, but at the very end of the trilogy, I was a bit underwhelmed here, mainly because I was confused on how he even got here. Although it doesn't overstay its welcome, it's the shortest phase in this 50-phase boss fight. So while I was expecting this reunion with Cloud to happen in part 3, they do separate quickly, ultimately being a tease for the proper reunion in the final part. Yeah, so Sephiroth sends back to another world or some shit again, leaving Cloud and Sephiroth to fight it out. In an unexpected turn of events, Sephiroth transforms into Bizarro Sephiroth, the penultimate boss from the original. This doesn't count as a boss in my book, so yeah, penultimate. My mind was cooked at this point, so much so that throughout the whole Bizarro boss fight, I felt nothing. The way this fight worked in the original was the party was split up into 3, depending if your level was high enough, and you continuously cycled through them to target different parts of his bizarre body. What on earth is this design, by the way? I don't dislike it, but it's extremely random. The fight here works in a very reminiscent way, with 3 fights going on with him all at once. One with Cloud, one with Zack, and one with Avalanche. This fight against Bizarro as a whole is decent. I didn't enjoy it on my first playthrough, but I've come around to it a bit. Really reminds me of a God of War 3 boss. Also, Zack is fighting him in Aerith's church, where Meteor is about to strike. Aerith clearly sent him here and protects him throughout the fight. After he's defeated after an hour, we get to the final phase. Sephiroth is back to his normal form. He sends black wisps shooting at Cloud, which is countered by white wisps. Cloud turns around to see Aerith walking out of a portal to back up Cloud. Yeah, if it wasn't clear the white whispers aren't directed by Aerith, it should be now. Also, I believe this is the original all-knowing Aerith. If we count this as its own boss and not part of the whole Bizarro phase, then this is my second favourite boss, just behind Jenova. Fighting with Cloud and Aerith, fucking up Sephiroth to one-winged angel, felt great. I didn't have that nothing feeling like I did when Zack showed up to back up Cloud. Despite me being concerned about all the multiverse stuff, I did say before that I actually do think the whole aspect of Sephiroth and Aerith fighting it out in the livestream is interesting. So Sephiroth gets defeated, wiping that arrogant smirk off his face for one of the only times in these past 2 games. He flies off like a little bitch, and Cloud is returned by Aerith back to reality. Zack is about to be smashed by the meteor, but is yet again rescued by Aerith. I really hope we see Zack and Aerith finally reunited in the final part. Everyone is grieving over Aerith's lifeless body. Cloud walks in, deluding himself that she's actually still alive. I don't think the reason he thinks she's alive is because his mind is trapped between different worlds, like a lot of people say. I believe he's just coping like no one else has coped before. He suppressed Zack's death, so why not Aerith's death? Although there is evidence that this could just be Aerith's livestream ghost. Everyone sits next to a pool of water, depressed. This is where Aerith must have just been buried by Cloud. However, we don't get that iconic scene here, as Cloud believes, you guessed it, he saved her life and that she's fine. I think one of the biggest indications of him repressing his trauma over her death is this shot of him briefly having flashes of her death, before his mind copes by seeing Aerith sitting right next to him when she's not actually there. Before I move on, I think it's pretty obvious that the water burial scene is going to be part of Cloud's whole livestream revelation sequence. We switch over to see what's going on in Midgar and Rufus, who is yet again being pestered by Glenn. So it turns out that Glenn is actually just a manifestation of Jenova or Sephiroth to edge Rufus towards starting another war with Wutai. For what purpose? No idea, but Sephiroth states a few times in the final chapter about getting off on spite, sadness and hatred or some shit. I don't know, he just talks in riddles the whole game. What do you want from me? I was always iffy and apathetic to this Glenn guy, but the payoff is pretty cool. Probably should have clocked that he was Genovified once he fucking teleported into Rufus' office with purple all around him and wearing a black robe. We get to the final scene of Zack. He's sitting in a church, which I believe to be in the main world, as all the flowers are still alive and well. As this is the last we see of Zack in this game, let's quickly just summarize his role in Rebirth. Clearly Aerith has plans for him. She teleports him throughout worlds at key moments, the most notable time being to help Cloud vs Sephiroth. So why is it specifically Zack that Aerith constantly saves and teleports? Well, firstly because she loves him, but her overall goal with him? I don't know, and we aren't supposed to know yet. Perhaps he's her trump card against Sephiroth. We get 2 more brief scenes. The first is just weapons continuing to battle Sephiroth in the livestream, and the second, the black robes presumably make their way to the northern crater. The final scene begins with most of the party mourning Aerith, while Sid and a few others fix up the tiny Bronco. No one can see her here, however, Red does seem to sense her, meaning that this could just be Aerith's livestream ghost Cloud sees. Wait, that's probably it. That it is her ghost, but Cloud just believes it to be her actual physical normal self. But then why can he only see her, I don't know, livestream shit? Cloud inspects the clear materia that Aerith gave him. I'm presuming it's going to fill up at some point to give Cloud an advantage over Sephiroth in some fashion. He also possesses the black materia to his surprise. He puts it in the Buster Sword, somehow, and Jill is punching the air right now, and he sees the rift in the sky from the other world. It's not visible to the rest of the group. Cloud definitely has traces of the world he was in his mind still. I said before that I don't think his mind is stuck between worlds, but I meant more in regards to why he sees Aerith. But still, I wouldn't say his mind is stuck between them. I just think it bled into his mind a bit. I mean, that could mean the same thing. But, well, regardless, he's fucking nuts now. The party get ready to fly north to get to Sephiroth. Tifa hasn't said anything since the Bizarro Sephiroth fight. She's shook out of her mind. Cloud sees or hallucinates Aerith one final time, promising that he'll stop Sephiroth. Where does Cloud actually think Aerith is going here, by the way? Where does he think she's gonna go in the middle of nowhere? The tiny Bronco takes flight, leaving Aerith gazing off at it in this pretty shot. And that's the end of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Through most of this final chapter, I felt nothing, honestly. I was really trying to contemplate all the shit that was happening, especially with all the multiverse type shenanigans. I'll be real, I think I just have to wait until the final part to make everything make more sense, assuming it actually ever does, to decide on how I feel about this ending. I've got a lot of mixed feelings on it. Shout out to the Genova Lifeclinger boss though, absolutely no complaints about that. Wherever they go with the story, I'm certain the final game will continue to do these amazing characters justice. They have to be the best cast of characters in any game I've played. Mass Effect comes to mind also, the original trilogy, not that Andromeda garbage. I'm sure the music will still be spectacular, and the gameplay will be improved even further. Even if I don't end up being satisfied with the whole multiverse story, it won't discount all of the aspects of these remakes that I just mentioned, and more. I believe Remake and especially Rebirth are some of the most charming games ever made, and the original as well. And I think that's why this series pulled me in like few games do these days. Most new games are soulless garbage. I was gonna make this outro longer, but this video has gone on way longer than I anticipated, and this video is gonna take ages to upload as my internet is absolutely arse right now. So let me end with this. Do what you want with the multiverse stuff, but for the love of God, don't even think about redeeming Sephiroth. The guy is an irredeemable psycho. I don't want to hear about he's actually being controlled by Genova. Shut up! I'm sick of every single villain being redeemed in media. Don't cheapen his character, don't ruin his character. With that said, I love Rebirth overall. This video has gone on long enough, goodbye.